Hey truckers, today we're seeing part 2 of I Have God to Your Farm. Let's dive into the video. He Dong revealed a fake smile and said, Ching Shui, I understand that you want to help your classmate. I'm also very willing to do something for your classmate without affecting the overall situation. However, food safety is our company's red line. Especially since there was a suspected food poisoning incident some time ago, we can't be muddle-headed on this red line. He Dong nagged on and on, not directly answering Ling Qingshua's question. However, Ling Qingxue didn't get impatient, which was a rare sight. Instead, she revealed a meaningful smile and quietly watched He Dong's performance with an expression as if she was watching a good show. When Ling Xiaotian and the other company executives heard He Dong's nonsense, they nodded their heads repeatedly. Ling Xiaotian, in particular, approved of He Dong even more in his heart, thinking that he knew the big picture. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. After beating around the bush for a long time, He Dong finally returned to Ling Qingshue's question. He continued, Qingshui, I know you might not be happy, but the truth is that the Taoyuan brand organic vegetables are worthy of being called super high-quality ingredients. They are also the key to turning the Ling GF and your classmate is just a vegetable seller trying to get close to our company and earn a little money by reselling vegetables. The two are not on the same level at all, there's no way to compare. After he finished speaking, He Dong looked at Ling Qingshuo with a wide smile, a smug expression on his face. Ling Qingshuo's mocking expression became even more obvious. She said indifferently, It seems that manager he is very impressed with this Paradise brand vegetable. I'm not just talking without thinking. He Dong laughed. Although the Taoyuan brand vegetables have only appeared in everyone's eyes for 2 days, the appraisal and auction held by the West River Moon Club are so grand that everyone who has attended the appraisal can't stop praising Taoyuan vegetables. These people are all famous people in Sanshan City. It can't be that they were hired by them, right? Ling Xiaotian also furrowed his brows and said, Qingshui, what are you trying to say? We're discussing serious matters now, so don't throw a tantrum. Ling Qingshui stood up and looked around at the company's top executives. Finally, her gaze stopped on He Dong and she said sarcastically, Manager He, you've just said so many good things about Paradise vegetables. I'll thank you on behalf of Ruofei. When Ling Qingshui said this, He Dong couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. He then asked, You. What do you mean by this? Ling Qingshui chuckled and turned to Ling Xiaotian. Dad, I just received a call. The Paradise vegetables that manager he was praising about were cultivated by my classmate, Xiao Ruofei. It's also the vegetable that I strongly recommended to you a few days ago. The Paradise company that is currently being registered is also solely owned by Xiao Ruofei. Ling Qingshui's words were like a stone that caused 1,000 ripples. The conference room immediately buzzed with discussion. As for He Dong, he sat on the chair in a daze as if he had been petrified. The expression on his face was extremely interesting. Ling Xiaotian revealed a shocked expression and asked, Qingshui, is the information confirmed? Ruo Fei told me personally, how could I be wrong? Ling Qingshui said. He Dong had only just recovered from his shock. Hearing Ling Qingshui's words was like grasping at a life-saving straw, and he immediately said loudly, He's definitely lying. He got in touch with Qingshui before because he wanted to use Qingshui to cheat our company's money. He must have come up with another trick after I saw through him. It just so happens that Taoyuan Vegetables' reputation has been in the limelight for the past 2 days, so he continued to use Taoyuan Vegetables' name to cheat people. It must be like this. Ling Qingshui looked at He Dong coldly, not bothering to explain anything to him. She only said to Ling Xiaotian, who had an uncertain look in his eyes, Father, Ruo Fei said that you can call President Jing of the West River Moon Club to confirm this matter. As long as you mention his name, President Jing will naturally tell you the truth. By the way, you should have President Jing's phone number, right? Ling Xiaotian nodded his head slightly and took out his phone doubtfully. At this time, He Dong suddenly said, "Chairman, you can't make this call. The source of Taoyuan vegetables must be the core secret of the West River Moon Club. If he rashly called President Jing to ask about this matter, not only would he not get any information, but he would also offend him. The cooperation in the future would definitely be impossible. This Xia Ruofei has evil intentions. He's trying to make Lingji Restaurant and Shijiang Moon Club become enemies." Ling Qingxue finally couldn't help but change her expression and coldly said, "Enough. He Dong, if it wasn't for you deliberately making things difficult for us, Ling F&B would be the one cooperating with Paradise Corporation right now, and the one in the limelight in the entire Sanshan food industry would also be Ling F&B. It's because of your stupidity and selfishness that Ruo Fei had no choice but to choose the West River Moon Club as his business partner. Our company has not been able to get out of this predicament, all because of you. You're still stopping my father from investigating this matter. What are your intentions?" At this time, he still accused Ruo Fei of being evil. "I think you're the one who's feeling guilty." "I didn't," He Dong explained with a pale face. Ling Xiaotian looked at He Dong with a complicated expression, then started to look for a phone number on his phone. He quickly found President Zhang's number and dialed it. Ling Xiaotian took his phone and stood up to walk out of the conference room. Before he even walked out of the conference room, everyone heard Ling Xiaotian say enthusiastically, "President Zhang? I'm Ling Xiaotian from Ling F&B. I have something to ask you." Then, the thick door of the conference room was closed, blocking Ling Xiaotian's voice. No one could hear what Ling Xiaotian and President Jing were talking about on the phone outside the conference room. These high-ranking officials all looked at He Dong with complicated gazes. There was pity, gloating, and also indifference. Meanwhile, Ling Qingxue sat quietly in her seat, looking at He Dong's pale face and dejected appearance. Her heart was filled with joy. After watching this despicable person act so arrogantly for so many days, Ling Qingxue felt as disgusted as if she had eaten a fly every time she saw him. Today, she had finally vented her anger. If it was anyone else who dared to talk back to Ling Qingxue like this, they would have been kicked out of the company a long time ago. He Dong only dared to be so impudent because his father had saved Ling Xiaotian's life. It was also because of this that Ling Qingxue especially hated him. Very quickly, the meeting room's door opened once more. Ling Xiaotian walked back with a somewhat unsightly expression. Everyone's eyes were focused on him, but no one dared to ask. Ling Qingxue was the only one who smiled confidently and asked, "Dad, how's the questioning?" Ling Xiaotian's expression became a little awkward, not knowing how to answer Ling Qingxue. After a long while, Ling Xiaotian furrowed his brows and looked at He Dong, asking in a deep voice, "Little He, what's wrong with you? We're all trying to curry favor with such a high-quality supplier like Xia Ruofei. Why are you still pushing him away? Also, Qingxue said that you deliberately made things difficult for her and forcibly ruined the cooperation that had already been drafted. Is that true?" It was all good now. Old Jing from West River Moon had gotten a great deal. "What do you want to do?" "Ah." He Dong's face instantly paled when he heard this, and the last bit of hope in his heart also vanished. He slumped into his chair, completely not knowing how to deal with this kind of situation. The company's executives had obviously also gotten the answer, and they couldn't help but speak at the same time. "Chairman Ling, is the boss of Paradise Corporation really Qingxue? Can we make contact with him directly?" Chairman, since Qingxue has already agreed to work with him even though it has been temporarily stopped due to Hidong's personal reasons, now that the misunderstanding has been cleared up, we can still continue working together. Yes, Chairman Ling. If we can establish a long-term supply relationship with the Paradise Corporation, our company will definitely be able to take down the Ming Hao restaurant in one fell swoop. Chairman Ling. All right. Be quiet. Ling Xiaotian furrowed his brows and said loudly, "Why are you all so noisy? Do you think this is a wet market?" The moment Ling Xiaotian was enraged, the company's higher-ups and managers immediately fell silent and shut their mouths. For a moment, the meeting room became very quiet. Meanwhile, Ling Xiaotian tried his best to adjust his expression and make it gentler. He then looked at Ling Qingxue and squeezed out a smile, saying, "Qingxue, I was deceived by others and blamed you wrongly. Please don't take it to heart." Ling Qingxue pursed her lips and said after a moment of silence, "Dad, I know what you want to say. But I've told you before that the production of Ruofei's new vegetable product is still very low. He chose to cooperate with us because of me. Now he has signed a supply agreement with the West River Moon Club. I know that. But aren't you his classmate? Can you discuss with him, even if it's just a small portion, it'll be good enough for us to use it in an emergency?" Ling Qingxue revealed a meaningful look and said, "But Ruofei's vegetables still can't provide the test report from the authorities. At the moment, he doesn't have his own planting base." Ling Xiaotian laughed bitterly. "Qingxue, don't say such things in a fit of anger. I know you're still angry with father. However, this cooperation is very important to our company. I hope you can look at the big picture and help the company tide over this crisis first." Ariad updated Estirise at n//vel/bin. Calm. Ling Qingxue let out a soft sigh and said, "Actually, Ruofei already said on the phone that although the supply of vegetables is tight, I can still squeeze out some if I need it. But you have to talk to him personally." Ling Xiaotian hurriedly said, "I should. It should be. Qingxue, let's not waste any time, let's go over now." It was unprecedented for the boss of a restaurant chain to rush to see a young man for dozens of caddies of vegetables every day. This showed that the difficulties that Ling Gf&B was currently facing weren't small. Furthermore, the appearance of Paradise vegetables was so stunning, which was also an important reason why Ling Xiaotian placed so much importance on it. Ling Qingxue said calmly, "Father, Ruofei has another condition. When we go to negotiate, we must bring this manager he." After she finished speaking, Ling Qingxue glanced at Hidong in disgust. Hidong also seemed to have somewhat recovered from the shock, and he asked warily, "What does he want to do?" I don't want to see him." Ling Xiaotian frowned. He had always had a good impression of his old comrade's son. He was good-looking and had good work coordination skills. In order to repay his old comrade's kindness, he had been nurturing him on purpose. He even had the intention to matchmake his daughter with him. It was just that today's matter had let Ling Xiaotian see another side of Hidong. This side of him was so unbearable that Ling Xiaotian could not help but sigh. "Xiao He, this matter was caused by you. It's reasonable for them to ask you to go to their house and apologize." Ling Xiaotian said in a low voice, "This matter is settled. We will leave in 10 minutes. Old Hong, go get the car ready." Old Hong, the head of the group's office, quickly agreed and arranged for a car to go. 10 minutes later, Ling Xiaotian and Ling Qingxue walked out of the building and got into a black Mercedes-Benz. Hidong, who had lost his soul, also got into the car with a tearful face. the car started and headed straight for Xia Ruofei's holiday villa in Chongping. When he received a call from Ling Qingxue, who was still on the way, Xia Ruofei was preparing dinner downstairs. So he stopped what he was doing and tidied up the living room a little. When the sky was about to turn dark, the black Mercedes-Benz of Ling Ji Restaurant arrived at the holiday villa. This was Xia Ruofei's first time meeting Ling Xiaotian. Because of what had happened last time, he did not have a good first impression of this tall, middle-aged man. However, Ling Xiaotian was Ling Qingshue's father, so Xia Ruofei still gave him some face. He walked up to Ling Qingxue and exchanged a smile with her. Then, he greeted Ling Xiaotian with a smile. "Uncle Ling, how are you?" As for He Dong, who was timidly following behind Ling Xiaotian, Xia Ruofei completely ignored him. Ling Xiaotian laughed heartily and said, "Hello! Little Xia, I've heard Qingxue mention you before, but I've never had the chance to meet you. I'm sorry for believing what I heard about the cooperation last time." Ling Xiaotian did not hide anything from the start and chose to be direct. This made Xia Ruofei have a good impression of him. Xia Ruofei smiled. "Uncle Ling, Qingxue, let's talk inside." After he finished speaking, he made an inviting gesture and led the group into the villa. In the living room on the first floor, everyone took their seats according to their status. He Dong was the last to sit in the living room, not knowing whether to stand or sit, his face alternating between red and white. When Ling Xiaotian saw He Dong's cowardice, he couldn't help but furrow his brows. He said in a Ling Xiaotian hurriedly said. Deep voice. Xiao He, quickly apologized to Ruo Fei. He Dong opened his mouth and looked at Xia Ruofei again with a trace of resentment in his eyes. Just as he was about to speak with difficulty, Xia Ruofei waved his hand and said to Ling Xiaotian, "Uncle Ling, there's no need to apologize." "I don't need it." Then, Ling Xiaotian looked at Xia Ruofei in confusion. Since he didn't want He Dong to apologize, why did Xia Ruofei specifically ask He Dong to come here to see him? Xia Ruofei smiled and said, "Uncle Ling, I already know why you're here. Actually, I didn't intend to push the Taoyuan vegetables to the market so soon. It was Qingxue who strongly encouraged me after she tried these vegetables once." "What do you mean by encouraging?" "That's encouragement, okay." Ling Qingxue pouted and rolled her eyes at Xia Ruofei. "Qingxue, don't interrupt little Xia," Ling Xiaotian said. Xia Ruofei looked at Ling Qingxue in amusement and continued. "In short, it's because of the clear snow that the peach garden vegetables appeared in advance. I even discussed the details of the contract with Qingxue." Ling Xiaotian hurriedly said. "Little Xia, we were wrong in this matter." Xia Ruofei smiled and said, "Uncle Ling, that's not what I meant. I'm actually quite an easy person to talk to. When I was discussing the collaboration with Shi Jiangyue, I intentionally left some leeway because I was the first to agree to Qingxue." "Xiao Xia, I'm really grateful to you," Ling Xiaotian said with great joy. "Uncle Ling, I'm not done yet." Xia Ruofei smiled faintly and said, "This time, it's all because of He Dong's personal revenge. We're all adults, and we need to be responsible for what we've done." Xia Ruofei glanced at He Dong coldly and said, "So, the only condition for us to restart our cooperation is for Ling Ji Restaurant to fire He Dong." The dejected He Dong exploded when he heard this. He shouted at Xia Ruofei in exasperation. "What? You wish? Who do you think you are? What right do you have to fire me?" He then turned to Ling Xiaotian and said, "Uncle Ling, you must not listen to him. Even though his paradise vegetables is praised so highly, it's just a rumor. We've never seen it in real life. Moreover, he just admitted that there's no authoritative test report or planting base. Ling Qingxue looked at He Dong in disgust and said sarcastically, "During the company meeting just now, I think you were the one who praised Taoyuan vegetables to the heavens, right?" "We didn't say anything." He Dong was instantly at a loss for words. Ariad updated stirise at n/vel/bin.com. He could only hope that Ling Xiaotian would be considerate of their past relationship. He knew that if it was anyone else, Ling Xiaotian would definitely agree to Xiao Ruofei's conditions without hesitation. However, He Dong was the son of Ling Xiaotian's old comrade. Moreover, he was the son of his former class monitor, who had saved his life. That was a different story. As expected, Ling Xiaotian said to Xiao Ruofei with a troubled expression, "Xiao Xia, I know that He Dong is in the wrong regarding this matter. I've already severely criticized him in the meeting just now. I can ask him to apologize to you sincerely. Firing him. Isn't that a little too serious?" Xiao Ruofei revealed a faint smile and said, "Uncle Ling, an apology doesn't always work. At least this time, I hope to see the sincerity of Ling Ji Restaurant." Xiao Ruofei paused for a moment before he continued, "And I don't think firing him is a serious matter. The incident this time has already made it clear that he doesn't care about your company's interests at all. He's acting recklessly for his own selfish reasons and has set up obstacles for this cooperation. I don't think any company will be able to accept such a person." Ling Xiaotian smiled bitterly and said, "Little Xia, He Dong was just being silly. Can you be the bigger person and forgive him this once? Or can you change to another condition?" Ling Qingxue saw that her father was pleading with Xiao Ruofei and could not help but frown. "Dad, Ruofei is right. The company has its own rules. Based on what He Dong did, he should have been fired long ago." 8:19. He Dong also became anxious when he heard that and called out, "Ling Qingxue, what do you mean by this? When did I break the company's rules? In that situation, he didn't have a test report and didn't have his own vegetable base. I asked a few questions and even hit him. How could I agree to sign this contract?" Ling Qingxue pouted and said, "Don't say those grand words. You know what you're thinking. Qingxue, can you just stop talking?" Ling Xiaotian said helplessly. At first, he had wanted to match Ling Qingxue with He Dong, but now he saw that He Dong seemed like a piece of mud that couldn't be supported on a wall. Moreover, Ling Qingxue and he were like fire and water. Ling Xiaotian's little thoughts had long faded. However, He Dong was the only son of the former class monitor, so he definitely wouldn't kick him out of the class. Thus, he muttered to himself for a while before saying, "Xiao Xia, can you just do this for Uncle Ling's sake? He Dong, Uncle Ling, Qingxue has told me about the relationship between He Dong and your family." Xiao Ruofei said calmly, "But I'll still say the same thing. We're all adults. We should be prepared to bear the consequences of our actions." Xiao Ruofei glanced at He Dong and ignored his venomous gaze. He then said to Ling Xiaotian, "Besides, we're already giving Uncle Ling face by sitting down and talking today. If I didn't give him face, my partner would not be Shijiangyu Club but Minghao Restaurant. At that time, I had enough reason to do so, and I believed that the Minghao Restaurant would be very willing to cooperate with me." Ling Xiaotian's expression changed slightly. He knew very well what it would mean for Ling Ji Restaurant if Xiao Ruofei and Minghao Restaurant were to work together. Xiao Ruofei stood up and said, "Uncle Ling, please wait a moment. I have something to show you." Xiao Ruofei then walked up the stairs. Ling Qingxue looked at Xiao Ruofei's back, her eyes filled with tenderness. After this reunion, after so many years, she realized that the image of Xia Ruofei in her heart had not faded at all. On the contrary, her girlish feelings seemed to have been elevated again. It was no longer a hazy love. In comparison, in Ling Qingshua's mind, the ugly He Dong was not even worth a piece of when compared to Xia Ruofei. Xia Ruofei quickly returned with a document and handed it to Ling Xiaotian. "Uncle Ling, you can open it and take a look." Ling Xiaotian asked in confusion. "What is this?" Xia Ruofei smiled and said, "I signed a cooperation agreement with West River Moon Club, but because my company is still registered, this is only a draft agreement. It will take some time for the official contract to be signed." "I don't think it's appropriate," Ling Xiaotian said hesitantly. "It's fine," Xia Ruofei said with a smile. Then, he opened the document and took out the agreement. He flipped through 2 pages and passed it to Ling Xiaotian. He pointed at one of the terms and said, "I asked President Jing of West River Moon to add this. Do you still think I didn't give you face?" Ling Xiaotian's eyes narrowed, because he saw an exclusion clause on it, which was that the Taoyuan Vegetables, which was the agent of the West River Moon Club, could not have any form of cooperation with the Mingho restaurant and its associated companies. Looking at this clause, Ling Xiaotian couldn't help but be slightly moved. That's right. The other party was definitely full of sincerity. He had already done it to this extent, yet he still dared to say that he was not giving him face. Although Ling Xiaotian knew that this was mostly for Ling Qingxue represented Ling G.F.B. Ling Xiaotian said with emotion, "Little Xia, I didn't expect you to be so broad-minded. On behalf of Ling G.F.B., I thank you." Ling Qingxue, who was standing at the side, also saw this clause. She knew that Xia Ruofei had added this clause for her sake. She could not help but feel sweet in her heart. Xia Ruofei smiled but did not say anything. Ling Xiaotian knew what Xia Ruofei meant. He sighed and said, "Xiao Xia, let me go back and consider this matter." Ling Xiaotian obviously knew that Xia Ruofei would not give in, so he did not plead for He Dong. However, he couldn't make up his mind, so he could only put the negotiations on hold. Xia Ruofei smiled and nodded. "Sure, as long as you agree to my only condition, all the cooperation can start immediately, and it will be according to the plan that I have discussed with Qingxue before." He Dong saw that Xia Ruofei refused to give in and wanted to kick him out of Ling Ji restaurant. The resentment in his heart grew. He glared at Xia Ruofei with red eyes as if he wanted to eat him up. However, Xia Ruofei ignored him and took a sip of the tea. Ling Xiaotian sighed to himself and stood up. "Little Xia, we'll go back first then." "All right, I'll send you guys off," Xia Ruofei said with a warm smile. Ling Qingxue wanted to stay for dinner, but she couldn't bring herself to say it. Since Ling Xiaotian was here, Xia Ruofei naturally could not brazenly invite Ling Qingxue for dinner. So, everyone left the house with their own thoughts and came to the villa's courtyard. Before Ling Xiaotian got into the car, Xia Ruofei said meaningfully, "Uncle Ling, I personally think you can report this matter to your former squad leader. I believe that a veteran who is willing to sacrifice his own life for his comrades must have his own principles and bottom line in his heart." He Dong's heart trembled when he heard Xia Ruofei's words. His face was ashen. He knew his father too well. Ling Xiaotian also nodded his head thoughtfully and said, "I understand. Thank you, little Xia." Ling Qingxue turned back to look at Xia Ruofei reluctantly before she got into the Mercedes-Benz. Xia Ruofei waved at the car and watched them leave. The next day, Xia Ruofei woke up early and had a simple breakfast. After waiting for the people from the West River Moon Club to transport the Taoyuan brand vegetables, he returned to his bedroom, took out the spirit map scroll, and entered the medium. After 2 evolutions, the spirit map space had expanded by 4 times and was much more spacious. Xiao Ruofei could now use the space to do more things. He first checked the nameless plant. After picking 5 petals yesterday, there were still no new ones today. It seemed that the growth cycle of the petals had not shortened. However, today was only the 2nd day. It turned out that new ones would grow every 3 days, so he would have to continue observing tomorrow and the day after. Then, Xiao Ruofei looked at the succulent mother plant. Due to the acceleration of time, the overall environment had become much better after the evolution of the realm. The succulent mother plants were growing well, especially the ones he had bought online. They had completely recovered and were even larger than before. They could be cut again at any time. The succulent plant that Xiao Ruofei had chosen to be the mother plant had basically grown to the size of an adult plant. It would not have any problems with cutting. Xiao Ruofei took out the flower petal solution that he had concocted last time and watered each of the succulent mother plants. Then, he went to the vegetable field. In the innermost circle of the space, which was the space where Xiao Ruofei had first obtained the spirit map scroll, there was a neat row of vegetable fields. Further out was a large ring-shaped empty space. This was the space that had been expanded after 2 evolutions. Looks like I'll have to plant more things. Otherwise, it'll be a waste of land. Xiao Ruofei muttered to himself. Xiao Ruofei paid special attention to the cabbage that had been soaked in the petal solution. He realized that their growth was much better than other vegetables. They could be harvested in just 2 days. From the outside, they looked more lively than the ordinary vegetables in the space and looked very attractive. Xiao Ruofei decided to just pick the ripe cabbages. However, Xiao Ruofei did not use the petal solution again. The production of the flower petals was limited and the planting cycle in the interspace was so short. If he used it every time, it would consume a lot of energy. The petal solution was mainly used for large-scale planting in the outside world, so that the quality of the vegetables planted in the outside world would not be lower than that of ordinary vegetables in the space. After finishing the vegetable field, Xiao Ruofei finally came to the small pond. This was a new item that had appeared after the 2nd evolution. Although it was called a small pond, it was actually twice as big as the spirit pool that Xiao Ruofei had when he first obtained the spirit map space. Read lat.st chapters at no.vel.bin/.c/o/m only. However, there seemed to be a spring at the bottom of the spirit pool. Every time Xiao Ruofei entered the spatial spirit pool, the water would be replenished after a certain period of time. Hence, the water level in the spiritual pool would remain the same. The water in the pond was obviously drawn from the spirit pool, which meant that the water in the pond did not have any regenerative function. Xiao Ruofei walked around the 2-meter-wide pond and made a decision. Expand the area of the pond. He had been thinking about raising some fish and shrimp in the space the day before, but the pond was a little small. If he were to use it to raise fish, the capacity wouldn't be large. Besides, Xiao Ruofei also wanted to test the regeneration speed of the spirit pool water after it was drawn into the pond. He went back to the spirit pond, took a hoe and a shovel, and went to the pond. In this space, Xiao Ruofei had to rely on himself for everything and he was already used to it. Moreover, he was now absorbing a petal every 3 days. His physical fitness had been greatly enhanced, and doing some physical work was nothing difficult. Xiao Ruofei started to get busy. He didn't expand the pond immediately. Instead, he started to dig from the ground beside the pond. He first used a hoe to dig and then used a shovel to shovel the soil to the side. The soil in the interspace was relatively soft, so it was quite easy for Xiao Ruofei to sit on it. After a few hours of hard work, Xiao Ruofei had dug a round pit with a diameter of 5 meters and a depth of 2 meters beside the pond. The pit was only a dozen centimeters away from the pond and the ground was slightly lower than the pond. Xiao Ruofei wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked over to dig a hole in the pond. The water in the pond immediately flowed into the hole. At the same time, the water in the spatial spirit pond at a higher altitude started to flow towards them. After waiting for an hour, the pit that Xiao Ruofei had dug was filled with the spiritual pond water. However, it was only about half a meter deep. It was connected to the naturally formed pond and looked like a huge peanut lying on the ground. The water level of the spatial spirit pond had dropped by more than a meter. If it wasn't for the fact that its water level was lower than the exit, the water would have continued to flow into the pond. However, Xiao Ruofei also saw that the water in the spatial spirit pond was slowly recovering. It seemed like there was a spring at the bottom of the pond. As the water level in the spirit pool recovered, the water level of the spirit pool and the pond would eventually be equal. Xiao Ruofei was planning to open up a fish pond in the realm. Of course, he didn't need to do it on a large scale in the early stage. After he excavated the pond, it should be enough. Of course, Xiao Ruofei did not stay in the origin space and wait for the pond to store water. He immediately left the spirit map space. After returning to his bedroom, Xiao Ruofei first turned on his computer to check the Taobao platform. He realized that the customers had all received the goods that he had sent out last time. The reviews of the products were all positive, and many people asked when the new products would be available. Xiao Ruofei opened his order for the flower pot and checked the delivery. He realized that the package had already arrived in Sanshan City and should be received by tomorrow at the latest. Now that the space had evolved twice, the flow of time was 20 times faster than the outside world. With the help of the petal solution, the cutting would be ready for sale in 3 or 4 days. So he hung a notice in the shop's eye-catching position, telling everyone that the new goods would be on the shelf on time at 8 o'clock in the morning 5 days later, and everyone was welcome to buy at that time. After withdrawing all the money that the customers had received from Taobao into Alipay, Xiao Ruofei got up and went downstairs to the villa's backyard to check on the progress of the cabbage seedlings. After gently removing the plastic sheet covering the nursery, Xiao Ruofei was pleasantly surprised to find that 90% of the seeds had already sprouted. This speed was several times faster than the data he had obtained from the research. At this rate, the seedlings could be planted in 3 to 5 days. This discovery gave Xiao Ruofei more confidence in the petal solution. He carefully covered the plastic sheet again, then took out his phone to look at the time. He found that it was only 9 o'clock in the morning. Although he had been busy in the space for a few hours, only a short time had passed in the outside world when time was 20 times faster. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and decided to drive to Chongping County. First, he was going to buy a batch of fish to raise in the spacefish pond. Second, now that the space had expanded so much, he also wanted to go to the market to see if he could plant something with higher economic value. Xiao Ruofei took his wallet, walked out of the villa, and drove straight to Chongping County. After a few hours of hard work, Xiao Ruofei had dug a round pit with a diameter of 5 meters and a depth of 2 meters beside the pond. The pit was only a dozen centimeters away from the pond and the ground was slightly lower than the pond. Xiao Ruofei wiped the sweat from his forehead and walked over to dig a hole in the pond. The water in the pond immediately flowed into the hole. At the same time, the water in the spatial spirit pond at a higher altitude started to flow towards them. After waiting for an hour, the pit that Xiao Ruofei had dug was filled with the spiritual pond water. However, it was only about half a meter deep. It was connected to the naturally formed pond and looked like a huge peanut lying on the ground. The water level of the spatial spirit pond had dropped by more than a meter. If it wasn't for the fact that its water level was lower than the exit, the water would have continued to flow into the pond. However, Xiao Ruofei also saw that the water in the spatial spirit pond was slowly recovering. It seemed like there was a spring at the bottom of the pond. As the water level in the spirit pool recovered, the water level of the spirit pool and the pond would eventually be equal. Xiao Ruofei was planning to open up a fish pond in the realm. Of course, he didn't need to do it on a large scale in the early stage. After he excavated the pond, it should be enough. Of course, Xiao Ruofei did not stay in the origin space and wait for the pond to store water. He immediately left the spirit map space. After returning to his bedroom, Xiao Ruofei first turned on his computer to check the Taobao platform. He realized that the customers had all received the goods that he had sent out last time. The reviews of the products were all positive, and many people asked when the new products would be available. Xiao Ruofei opened his order for the flower pot and checked the delivery. He realized that the package had already arrived in Sanshan City and should be received by tomorrow at the latest. Now that the space had evolved twice, the flow of time was 20 times faster than the outside world. With the help of the petal solution, the cutting would be ready for sale in 3 or 4 days. So he hung a notice in the shop's eye-catching position, telling everyone that the new goods would be on the shelf on time at 8 o'clock in the morning 5 days later, and everyone was welcome to buy at that time. After withdrawing all the money that the customers had received from Taobao into Alipay, Xiao Ruofei got up and went downstairs to the villa's backyard to check on the progress of the cabbage seedlings. After gently removing the plastic sheet covering the nursery, Xiao Ruofei was pleasantly surprised to find that 90% of the seeds had already sprouted. This speed was several times faster than the data he had obtained from the research. At this rate, the seedlings could be planted in 3 to 5 days. This discovery gave Xiao Ruofei more confidence in the petal solution. He carefully covered the plastic sheet again, then took out his phone to look at the time. He found that it was only 9 o'clock in the morning. Although he had been busy in the space for a few hours, only a short time had passed in the outside world when time was 20 times faster. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and decided to drive to Chongping County. First, he was going to buy a batch of fish to raise in the spacefish pond. Second, now that the space had expanded so much, he also wanted to go to the market to see if he could plant something with higher economic value. Xiao Ruofei took his wallet, walked out of the villa, and drove straight to Chongping County. After parking his car near the seafood market in the county, Xiao Ruofei strolled into the bustling market alone. However, he was not in a hurry to buy it. Instead, he strolled around the market first. When he saw buyers and sellers chatting, he would go over and listen to them to understand the situation. After walking around for a while, Xiao Ruofei had a general understanding of the aquatic products market. Not only did they sell all kinds of ornamental fish and edible fish, but they also sold all kinds of young fish. There was a wide variety of species. Xiao Ruofei knew that he had come to the right place. He should be able to buy what he needed here. Xiao Ruofei found a shop that looked quite big and walked in. On both sides of the store were rows of large glass water tanks with all kinds of ornamental fish. A chubby man came up to them and asked enthusiastically, "Boss, are you here to buy fish?" Xiao Ruofei looked around the shop and said, "You sell ornamental fish? Looks like we're in the wrong place. I'm here to buy some fish." Then, Xiao Ruofei turned around and prepared to walk out of the store. The fat boss quickly stopped him and said, "Boss, don't be in such a hurry to leave. We also sell fish fry here, and they're all very high-quality ones that were bred in an environment that imitates the wild. What kind of fish do you need? How much do you want?" Xiao Ruofei said, "Just grass carp, carp, and chubs, mainly grass carp. I don't need too much if I don't overdo it." When Xiao Ruofei was shopping at the seafood market, he used his mobile phone to do some research. He found out that these 3 were the most common edible fish and could be mixed. The spacefish pond had just been opened, so it was the most suitable to raise these common fish. Yes, yes, yes. We have these fish in stock. How much do you need? The fat boss asked. Xiao Ruofei made a rough estimate based on the information he found and said, there are about 500 grass fry, and 100 of each of the other two types. Generally speaking, a fish pond could store about 8,000 to 12,000 fish per mu. The fish pond in the inner space was only 20 to 30 square meters, so 5 to 600 fish should be suitable. However, the space was different from the outside world. Perhaps the breeding density could be higher. If that was the case, he could just add some more in. The fat boss smiled and said, that's not a lot indeed. According to the rules, we need at least 5,000 fish to be considered as wholesale. But since it's fate that we met, I can give you the wholesale price. How about 1.50 yuan per fish? Our fish are all bred in an environment that imitates the wild environment. This price was similar to the one Xiao Ruofei had just found out. Hence, he nodded and said, all right. Let's take a look at the baby fish first. All right. The fat boss led Xiao Ruofei to the inside of the shop and pointed to a row of large fish tanks. These were just transported from the seedling base today. A few hundred fish isn't much, we can just take them from the store. Xiao Ruofei took a look. These fish were generally 2 to 3 centimeters long. They were arranged neatly and had the same color. The fish looked clean and shiny. He nodded. The fat boss wasn't lying. The quality of the fish fry should be good. Xiao Ruofei reached out and stirred the fish in the fish tank. The fish swam away quickly after being disturbed, and their reaction was very fast. Xiao Ruofei had an idea and said, boss, the fish fry are pretty good. I have a large plastic bucket in my car. Please wait a moment, I'll drive the car over. All right, all right. The fat boss responded. Xiao Ruofei returned to the parking lot and drove the pickup truck back to the fish fry shop. He took out a few large plastic buckets from the truck and brought them into the shop. The fat boss had already found a worker to wait there. Xiao Ruofei started to fish for the baby fish as soon as he entered. 500 to 600 fish was not a lot, and they were all caught in no time. Xiao Ruofei paid the total of 900 yuan in cash. Recently, the West River Moon Club had been paying him 600 to 700 yuan a day, so Xiao Ruofei had plenty of cash. The fat boss enthusiastically helped Xiao Ruofei move the plastic bucket to the pickup truck. Just as Xiao Ruofei was about to get into the car and leave, the shop assistant rushed out and said to the fat boss, "Boss, that red dragon seems to be in a worse condition. I'm afraid it can't survive." The fat on the fat boss's face couldn't help but tremble a few times. He showed a pained expression and said, "Mother f***. I've suffered a huge loss this time." Xiao Ruofei asked curiously, "Boss, what happened?" The fat boss said dejectedly, "Hey. Don't mention it, I bought a red arowana a few days ago. I wanted to raise it for a while and sell it for a good price, but I didn't expect it to get sick in just 5 or 6 days. Now, I don't think it will survive today. I have to hurry over and see if there's any other way." Xiao Ruofei's heart skipped a beat. He was not in a hurry to leave and followed the boss back into the shop. The red arowana was kept in a separate fish tank and was about 25 centimeters long. It could no longer maintain its balance and floated in the fish tank on its last breath. The red surface of its body was slightly black and had no luster. The shop assistant said anxiously, "Boss, it hasn't eaten for 2 days. Salt and penicillin have no effect. What should we do?" The fat boss was in a bad mood and said, "How would I know what to do? I'm not a god, how can I possibly save it?" Then, the fat boss waved his hand and said, "Forget it, just admit that you're unlucky. Let's just treat it as that 8,000 yuan went down the drain." Xiao Ruofei looked at the dying red arowana and suddenly said, "Boss, how about you sell this red arowana to me?" The fat boss was stunned for a moment and said, "This fish is dying, it's useless even if you buy it. I'm doing legitimate business, I can't do things that cheat people." Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "He's not dead yet, is he? I can't have it even if I die. To tell you the truth, boss, I heard that red arowana tastes good either steamed or fried. I've wanted to get one for a long time to try, but the price is too expensive. Now that your fish is dying, why don't you sell it to me at a lower price? You can reduce your loss." The fat boss was speechless. Red arowana was a high-end ornamental fish with auspicious meanings, especially favored by businessmen. In Hong Kong and Macau, a good red arowana could be sold for millions or even millions, and this man wanted to buy it and kill it to eat? However, the fat boss couldn't care less. At least Xiao Ruofei was right. If he didn't sell it, the red arowana might die today. It would be worthless then. If he sold it to Xiao Ruofei, he could at least make up for the loss. As for what Xiao Ruofei bought it for, it had nothing to do with him. After careful consideration, the fat boss nodded and said, "Little brother, I can sell it to you, but you've seen the situation of this fish. You can't go back on your word after buying it." Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "Of course. Boss, give me a price. Don't set it too high, I can't afford it if it's too high." The fat boss pondered for a moment and tentatively said, "How about 2,000? Little brother, I bought this fish for 8,000 yuan. Xiao Ruofei thought for a moment and was too lazy to bargain. The main thing was that the red arowana was about to die, and bargaining would waste time. He nodded and said, "Deal." Xiao Ruofei took out 2,000 yuan and handed it to the fat boss. The fat boss also let out a long sigh of relief. Although he lost 6,000 yuan, he finally sent this god of plague away, and it wasn't like he lost everything. He made up his mind to never enter the arowana again. He was scared of her just once. The fat boss gave Xiao Ruofei a small plastic water tank and carefully transferred the red arowana into the tank. Xiao Ruofei walked out of the store with the water tank and placed it on the mat of the front passenger seat of the pickup truck. Then, he said goodbye to the fat boss, got into the car, and left in a hurry. The fish could not hold on for much longer. Xiao Ruofei drove very fast. After leaving the county, he found a place where there was no one and parked the car. Then, he used his mind to enter the spirit map space and took out a mineral water bottle. The bag contained the flower petal solution that he had prepared. He had originally planned to send it to Huzi's mother, but he had been busy for the past 2 days and had not had the time to go over. Now, it came in handy. Xiao Ruofei unscrewed the bottle cap and poured 2 spoons of the petal solution into the plastic water tank. Then, he stared at the red arowana in the water tank, feeling a little nervous. Discover WStories on no/e/lbin.com. The reason why Xiao Ruofei was so nervous was because red arowana was extremely valuable. It was one of the best ornamental fish. If he could save this fish, he would definitely make a lot of money. Of course, Xiao Ruofei knew the value of the red arowana thanks to a comrade from the recruit company. That comrade from Jiangsu in Zhejiang province was a true blue rich second generation. His father raised a red arowana and it was said that he spent more than $1 million to buy it. This fellow bragged to his comrades all day long and told them a lot about the red arowana, so Xiao Ruofei had a deep impression of it. However, Xiao Ruofei was recruited into the Lone Wolf Assault Team not long after he was dismissed. He did not have much contact with this comrade of his. He heard that he retired from the army and went home to help his father do business after 2 years of service. I wonder how this interesting guy is doing now. When Xiao Ruofei saw the red arowana, he could not help but think of his comrade. However, this thought only flashed through his mind as most of his attention was focused on the dying red arowana. Under Xiao Ruofei's nervous gaze, the red arowana, which had been motionless for a long time, opened its mouth slightly and then swayed its tail gently. "There's hope!" Xiao Ruofei revealed a look of joy. Sure enough, after a while, the red arowana seemed to have recovered a lot. Its tail swayed even more, and then it twisted its body, regaining its balance and no longer showing the state of turning white. Xiao Ruofei was overjoyed. The petal solution was indeed effective. However, Xiao Ruofei felt that the red arowana was still recovering a little slowly, so he unscrewed the cap and dripped another drop of the petal solution into it. The red arowana was like a cat that smelled the fishy smell. It swam to the spot where the petal solution was dripped in and lifted its head out of the water with its mouth wide open. Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but laugh. This little guy was quite smart. He didn't hesitate any longer and dripped a few drops of the petal solution down. The difference was that this time, he directly dropped the petal solution into the red arawana's mouth. The red arowana swallowed the petal solution in big mouthfuls, and its spirit recovered quickly. The scales on its body gradually became lustrous. Xiao Ruofei stopped after dripping more than 10 drops of petal solution. He tightened the bottle cap and could tell that the red arowana had fully recovered. The red arowana couldn't wait for the petal solution, so it swam around in the plastic water tank unhappily. Its tail was so powerful that it even splashed water. If the fat boss saw this, he would be shocked. Was this still the red arowana that was so sick that it could die at any time? Xiao Ruofei was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, he moved the plastic water tank with the red arowana into the spirit map space. Discover NW Chapter SNN0EL by.com. Then, he opened the door and got out of the car. He climbed into the back of the car and saw that there was no one around. He also put the plastic bucket with the 600 fish fry into the spirit map space. Then, Xiao Ruofei got into the driver's seat, picked up his phone, and did some simple research. He had always had an idea to simulate a natural ecosystem in the spacefish pond. He didn't need to use any artificial feed when breeding fish, including this red arowana. He was going to use this method to breed it. Xiao Ruofei searched for relevant information. The idea was indeed feasible. However, most people did it in places like reservoirs and small lakes. Very few people did it in small fish ponds. Xiao Ruofei was still very confident. After all, he had the spirit map space and the petal solution. After looking for information, Xiao Ruofei knew that he had to build a complete ecosystem in the spacefish pond. There had to be seaweed, plankton, small fish and shrimp, and so on, so that they could form a complete ecosystem. What should he do? Xiao Ruofei furrowed his brows as he pondered. Suddenly, he remembered that there was an abandoned pond on the way to the holiday villa, and an idea came to him. However, before he used his idea, Xiao Ruofei had to verify something. So he put down his phone and started the car, driving towards the holiday villa. After he got home, Xiao Ruofei jogged upstairs and locked the door and windows. Then, he entered the spirit map space. He didn't check the plastic water tank with the red arowana and the buckets of fish. Instead, he picked up his hoe and shovel and went to the big fish pond he had dug up. The water level in the spirit pond had already recovered, and the pond's water level had risen to around 1.5 meters, which was the same as the water level in the spirit pond, so the spring water didn't come out anymore. Xiao Ruofei estimated the distance with his eyes, then picked up the hoe and started to work. 2 hours later, a straight ditch appeared beside the pond. The ditch extended all the way to the invisible membrane at the end of the space. Xiao Ruofei dug a hole in the pond with his hoe. The The water in the fish pond started to flow out through the hole and into the ditch. Xiao Ruofei picked up a fish from the plastic bucket and threw it into the ditch. The fish immediately followed the flow of water. Xiao Ruofei followed the water flow and soon reached the end of the small space. Xiao Ruofei stared at the ditch nervously. The water passed through the space membrane without any resistance and flowed into unknown space outside. As for the young fish, it was as if it was blocked by an invisible wall, struggling against the light green membrane. Yay! Xiao Ruofei called out happily. His guess had confirmed that the Swan and I's pool of water was a product of the space itself. The light green membrane did not obstruct it at all, and since the Fry and him were both outsiders, they were blocked by the space membrane. Xiao Ruofei guessed that the area outside the membrane was still within the spirit map space, but he would have to wait for the space to evolve again before he could see it. Therefore, the pool water should still be in the spirit map space, and it might even have seeped into the ground and gathered at the spring eye. In this way, Xiao Ruofei could change the water in the pond at any time. Although the water in the spatial pond had a strong purifying ability and was extremely clear without a trace of impurities, Xiao Ruofei was worried that the fish would not be able to survive and grow for a long time if the water was still. But now that the water could flow away, Xiao Ruofei could change the water regularly. He scooped up the fry, then jogged back and threw the fry into the bucket. Then, he used a shovel to shovel the soil to block the gap in the fish pond. Then, Xiao Ruofei started to get busy again. He moved the soil that he had just dug out between the pond and the fish pond. He increased the height of the mini-stream and finally made a small dam at the junction of the stream and the fish pond. Xiao Ruofei blocked the dam and the water level of the mini-stream started to rise. The spiritual pond and the fish pond were completely separated. Xiao Ruofei had gone through so much trouble just to ensure that the spirit pool water was clean. Still, although the purifying ability of the spiritual pond water was very strong, Xiao Ruofei did not want the water that he usually drank to be mixed with the small fish, shrimp, and plankton that would go upstream in the fish pond in the future. With this simple dam, the spirit pond and the fish pond were isolated from each other and would only be connected when the water was changed. When the water was changed, the water flowed outward, and under the impulse, it was basically impossible for the creatures in the fish pond to enter the spirit pool. After finishing all this, Xiao Ruofei could finally implement his plan to create a space fish pond. He left the spirit map space, hid the spirit map scroll, and quickly went downstairs. He drove the pickup truck straight to the abandoned pond. Soon, Xiao Ruofei drove to an abandoned pond about a kilometer away from the villa. Out of his habit as a Special Forces member, Xiao Ruofei observed the pond the moment he got out of the car. He realized that the pond was indeed abandoned. There were weeds growing around the pond, and there was a simple shed not far away with a big hole in its roof. It was on the verge of collapse. It was obvious that no one had lived there for a long time. Then, Xiao Ruofei looked around to make sure that there was no one around. He then slowly walked to the pond and squatted down. Xiao Ruofei put his hand into the pond and tried to contact the spirit map space with his mind. Then, he tried to give instructions. In an instant, Xiao Ruofei felt the water in the pond, the mud at the bottom of the pond, and a large piece of seaweed disappear into thin air. The next moment, they appeared in the spirit map space and fell into the spatial fish pond according to his instructions. Of course, due to the size of the pond, losing one piece would not cause the water level to drop significantly. Xiao Ruofei was overjoyed. This method was indeed effective. It was so much more convenient after the space had evolved. Xiao Ruofei had a plan in mind. He immediately did the same thing and continuously took the water, mud, and algae from the abandoned pond into the spatial pond. It contained a large amount of plankton, small fish, shrimp, aquatic plants, and so on. It would definitely form a complete ecosystem in the space spirit pool. After a few dozen times, Xiao Ruofei could feel that the bottom of the fish pond was covered with a thick layer of mud. He knew that it was about time. So he stood up and quickly returned to the car, driving back to the holiday villa. As soon as he got home, Xiao Ruofei rushed to his bedroom, took out the spirit map, and entered the medium. Xiao Ruofei immediately appeared beside the spatial fish pond. Now that his connection with the spirit map space was getting closer, he could control himself to appear at a certain location in the space. The space fish pond was now very different from how clear it had been before. After the mud and algae were absorbed, the fish pond became very muddy. However, Xiao Ruofei knew that this was only temporary. The purifying ability of the spiritual pool was so strong that it should be clear again soon. The small fish and shrimp in the abandoned pond seemed to have realized that the environment had changed. They were very excited about the spiritual pond and swam around in the spacefish pond. Xiao Ruofei's consciousness had a connection with the spirit map space, so he could even feel the little loaches in the mud wriggling around and a small turtle hiding in a cluster of algae. The pond in the interspace was full of life. Xiao Ruofei was relieved. He believed that a stable ecosystem would be formed soon. Then, his fish would be living in a wild environment. Moreover, it was several levels higher than the wild environment. After all, this was the interior of the spirit map space, and the quality of air and water was many times higher than the outside world. However, Xiao Ruofei felt that the number of fish and prawns in the pond was still too small. After all, the pond was abandoned and Xiao Ruofei had only randomly taken the mud from the pond and brought them into the medium. However, this problem was easy to solve. He could go to the market again, buy some small fish and river shrimp, and throw them into the spacefish pond. The biggest purpose of this trip was the plankton in the mud and water, as well as the algae in the pond. Xiao Ruofei walked around in satisfaction and came to the plastic bucket that contained the fish. He took the mineral water bottle that contained the petal solution and poured a little into each plastic bucket. The fry in the plastic bucket immediately started to writhe. It was obvious that the petal solution was very attractive to them. After Xiao Ruofei poured the solution in, he did not care about the fish fry anymore. He let them absorb the petal solution in the plastic bucket. He went straight to the plastic water tank. The red arowana had fully recovered and was swimming happily in the plastic water tank. The scales of the red arowana were very large, and each one was very neat and bright. The gills had begun to show spreading hair color. The range was not very large, but the orange-red color was very rich and pure. Xiao Ruofei was very happy. The red arowana was still in its infancy and would go through several stages of hair color in the future. In the end, the whole fish would be red. The darker and darker the red, the more valuable it would be. This red arowana should have the hair color of a first-stage arowana. The color was already so rich, which meant that it was of a good species. With the various nutrients in the space and the time flow that was 20 times faster, Xiao Ruofei would be able to harvest a valuable red arowana very soon. He thought about it and decided not to keep the red arowana in the water tank. The conditions in the space were unique, and it would be more beneficial for the red arowana to grow in a simulated wild environment. However, he couldn't keep it in a big fish pond either. Red arowana were fed with small fish and shrimp. If it was left in a big fish pond, the baby fish wouldn't survive. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and decided to dig a small pond next to the big fish pond to raise the red arowana. Xiao Ruofei picked up the hoe and shovel and started to work. More than an hour later, Xiao Ruofei, who was sweating profusely, looked at the 2-meter-wide pit he had dug with satisfaction. Other than the pit, Xiao Ruofei had dug 2 more water diversion tanks. One was used to draw water from the big fish pond, and the other was used to drain water. Xiao Ruofei dug out some mud and algae from the big fish pond, then filled the small fish pond with water. After resting for a while, Xiao Ruofei released the fish for more than an hour. They should have absorbed all the petal solution by now. He carried the plastic bucket to the big fish pond and used a water ladle to scoop out the fish and carefully poured them into the fish pond. It was not until all 600 fish had been placed in the big fish pond that Xiao Ruofei let out a long sigh of relief. The matter of the space fish pond was finally settled. Then, Xiao Ruofei carefully placed the red arowana into the small fish pond and poured some petal solution into both fish ponds. He then left the spirit map space with a peace of mind. Back in his bedroom, Xiao Ruofei kept the painting close to his body and looked at the time. It was still early for lunch. The 20 times time flow in the spirit map space was so practical. Hence, Xiao Ruofei decided to drive to the seafood market in Chongping County. There were many stalls selling small fish and prawns at the entrance. As many people would buy them to feed their fish and cats, Xiao Ruofei bought 2 plastic buckets of fish and prawns and placed them in the driver's seat. On the way back to the villa, Xiao Ruofei put the 2 buckets of small fish and shrimp into the spirit map space and placed them in the 2 fish ponds. In this way, the ecosystem of the 2 fish ponds was basically completed. Soon, it would be self-sufficient and he would not have to worry too much. At most, he would pour some petal solution into the young fishes and red arowana to absorb from time to time. It was already noon by the time they arrived at the villa. Xiao Ruofei's phone rang just as he was about to make lunch. He took it out and looked at the caller ID. It was Ling Qingxue. Xiao Ruofei smiled and answered the call. "FITDEU up TS on N.O.V/E/LN. Fei. My dad has fired He Dong." The moment the call connected, Ling Qingxue said excitedly, "I won't have to see that annoying face again." Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, "Oh, really? Uncle Ling made a decision so quickly? I thought he would hesitate for a few days." After the brief interaction yesterday, Xiao Ruofei could tell that Ling Xiaotian was a very loyal person. He Dong was the son of the old class monitor who had saved his life. It would be very difficult for Ling Xiaotian to expel He Dong. Ling Qingxue said, "How can I not hesitate? My dad probably didn't sleep last night. His eyes were bloodshot when he woke up in the morning. He was also restless this morning. He went into the study room to give Uncle He a call, and when he came out, he made the decision to fire He Dong, so it's like this. It seems that the old squad leader didn't lose his soldier's character." Xiao Ruofei nodded and said. Ling Qingxue hesitated for a moment before saying, "But Ruofei, my dad is calling some of his close friends. He probably wants to arrange a job for He Dong. You won't be angry, right?" Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, "Why should I be angry? I only asked Ling's F and B to fire He Dong. As for Uncle Ling finding a job for He Dong, that's his own decision. Why should I be angry? To be honest, if he didn't do this, he wouldn't be called Ling Xiaotian." Ling Qingxue stuck out her tongue and asked, "You're making it sound like you know my dad very well." Xiao Ruofei laughed. "There are some people who don't need to be in contact too much. Sometimes, you can tell what kind of person they are with just a few words. Yo! He even appreciated my dad's talent." Ling Qingxue chuckled. "That's right," Xiao Ruofei said casually, then continued, "Speaking of which, the main reason I asked to fire He Dong was because you were so annoyed by his pestering. So, I might as well use this opportunity to drive this fly away. As for which company he goes to work at, what does it have to do with me?" To be honest, Xiao Ruofei didn't care about He Dong at all. To Xiao Ruofei, He Dong was no different from a fly. When Ling Qingxue heard this, she immediately said happily, "So you care about me that much?" Xiao Ruofei patted his forehead and quickly changed the topic. "Well, Qingxue, let's talk about the cooperation. Ling Qingxue pouted and snorted. She was unhappy with Xiao Ruofei's behavior of retreating after a single touch. However, she still said unwillingly, "Your request has been met. My dad said that he will personally go over to you in the afternoon to sign the contract." "Are you satisfied?" Xiao Ruofei chuckled. "Tell him not to come yet. My own company will be registered soon, and I'll sign it directly under the company's name. Otherwise, I'll have to change the contract again. Isn't it better to get everything done in one go? But our company is in urgent need of your Taoyuan vegetables." Ling Qingxue pouted and said, "I can't even wait a day." Xiao Ruofei laughed. "We won't delay the supply of vegetables. Tell Uncle Ling that you can send someone to bring the vegetables tomorrow. We'll follow the quantity and price we agreed on last time." "This is more like it." Ling Qingxue chuckled. "Then I'll bring a car over to transport the vegetables tomorrow morning." "Aw. You're coming too?" Xiao Ruofei asked subconsciously. "Humph. Why? I don't welcome you?" Ling Qingxue snorted and asked. "That's not it," Xiao Ruofei said hurriedly. "But you're a big manager and you're so busy. You don't have to do such a small thing like pulling the vegetables, do you?" "I'm coming," Ling Qingxue said. "You still owe me a meal. Prepare well tomorrow. I'll have lunch at your place." Xiao Ruofei groaned in his heart. It seemed that this girl was prepared to stay here the whole morning tomorrow. He had so many things to do every day, where would he find the time to accompany her? However, since Ling Qingxue had asked for it and he did owe her a meal, Xiao Ruofei could not reject her and could only agree with a bitter smile. After hanging up the phone, Xiao Ruofei called President Jing of the West River Moon Club and informed him about the cooperation between him and Ling Ji. This was what the two of them had agreed on back then. Moreover, the target customers of Ling Ji Restaurant and the West River Moon Club were completely different. Moreover, the supply volume was not high, so there was no need to worry about the loss of high-end customers. People with money and status ate in a different way. Even if the ingredients were also Taoyuan vegetables, the club members generally wouldn't lower their status and spend in such a public restaurant. Therefore, President Jing was not unhappy. Instead, he teased Xiao Ruofei over the phone and said that he would arrange a one-stop service for Xiao Ruofei the next time he went to Shijiangyue. President Jing was in a good mood after hearing the popularity that Taoyuan vegetables had brought to the West River Moon Club. Xiao Ruofei made lunch for himself. When he was done with the dishes and was about to go to the backyard to look at the cabbage seedlings, he received a call from the courier. It turned out that the small flower pots, succulent plants, and other things he had ordered had arrived. Xiao Ruofei was a little surprised. He had thought that he would only receive it tomorrow. Since he had received it today, it would be for the best. After all, Ling Qingxue was coming tomorrow morning, and she probably wouldn't be able to do much. Hence, Xiao Ruofei drove non-stop to the express delivery point in Chongping County to pick up the goods. The huge box almost filled the entire car. After driving back to the villa, Xiao Ruofei made sure that there was no one around and put the big box into the spirit map space. Then, he quickly went upstairs to lock the door and windows, took out the spirit map scroll, and entered the space with a thought. In the boundless space, Xiao Ruofei opened the box and took out a few hundred plastic flower pots and a few large fiber bags filled with succulent plants. Different species of succulent plants had different requirements for their materials. Xiao Ruofei bought a large bag of each type of succulent plant that he currently had. Then, Xiao Ruofei began the second cutting process on the succulents. With the experience from the first time, Xiao Ruofei was even more familiar with the route this time. It was still the Buck and Strider A88 and military dagger. The only difference was that Xiao Ruofei was terminally ill the last time. Now, not only had he recovered, but he was also much stronger than when he was at his peak. Naturally, his work efficiency had also increased. More than 5 hours later, more than a dozen pots of succulent mother plants were scarred and looked miserable, while more than 180 pots of small succulents were next to them. Xiao Ruofei took out the flower petal solution that he had concocted and sprinkled some on each wound on the mother plant. Then, he diluted the flower petal solution again and mixed it with the spirit pond water in the watering can. He watered every pot of succulents. Xiao Ruofei dusted his hands in satisfaction. He picked up the bottle of spiritual pond water and gulped down a few mouthfuls of water. Suddenly, he felt refreshed and all his fatigue disappeared. Next, he just had to wait a few days and these little succulents would be put on the shelves for sale. That would be another income of more than 100,000 yuan. The next day, Xiao Ruofei woke up very early and entered the spirit map space. He prepared all the vegetables that were to be provided for the 11 Jiang Moon Club and Lingji restaurant. He also made a mark on the vegetable basket and sprinkled some spirit pond water on each basket to maintain its freshness. He then went to the garage on the first floor and took out all the vegetable baskets. After doing all this, Xiao Ruofei went to the kitchen to heat up a glass of milk and a few pieces of bread for breakfast. Not long after breakfast, Xiao Ruofei heard the sound of an engine from outside. He walked out of the villa and saw that the small truck from the West River Moon Club had arrived first. The purchaser was already familiar with the place. He greeted Xiao Ruofei and the two of them led the two workers into the garage. The vegetables for Shi Jianyue and Ling Ji were distributed separately. Xiao Ruofei asked the workers to carry all the vegetables out of the clubhouse, weighed the weights, and paid. Soon, the small truck from Shijianyue Clubhouse carried Taoyuan vegetables out of the villa. Xiao Ruofei had an extra 6,000 to 7,000 yuan in cash. The club and Ling's restaurant would bring in more than 10,000 yuan of income every day, which was about 300,000 yuan a month. Including the succulent plants, Xiao Ruofei could deliver a batch of goods every half a month, which was about 400,000 yuan a month. In total, Xiao Ruofei's monthly income was at least 700,000. This money-making speed was terrifying, but it seemed that he spent money even faster. Xiao Ruofei estimated that even if he spent a month's income on jade, it might not be enough for the spirit map space to level up again. After all, the last evolution had consumed nearly 500,000 yuan of jade. Xiao Ruofei strolled around the courtyard for a while before the second batch of guests arrived. A white truck and an orange Porsche 911 drove into the courtyard one after another. "Are you au fait?" Ling Qingxue called out happily after she got out of the car. She quickly walked towards Xiao Ruofei. Xiao Ruofei's eyes suddenly lit up. Ling Qingxue was wearing a short leather jacket with a plaid shirt, tight-fitting jeans, and beige wool boots. Her figure was curvaceous, and her long legs, which made countless men's imagination run wild, were tight. She was full of youthful energy. This was very different from how she usually dressed, which made Xiao Ruofei lose his focus. Ling Qingxue's heart was filled with sweetness, and at the same time, her face flushed red. "What are you looking at? Are there flowers on my face?" Xiao Ruofei quickly looked away, embarrassed. He laughed awkwardly and did not know how to answer. Ling Qingxue chuckled and glanced at Xiao Ruofei flirtatiously. She said softly, "Dumbo." At this moment, a woman in a black business suit got down from the small truck. She walked over with the driver and a worker. When she saw that Xiao Ruofei was very humble, she bowed slightly and greeted, "Good day, Mr. Xiao. Ruofei, this is Manager Su from our procurement department." Ling Qingxue introduced. She used to be the deputy manager of the procurement department. It was obvious that this was He Dong's successor. For the procurement manager to personally visit him for the first time to pick up vegetables, to a certain extent, it also reflected the importance that Ling Xiaotian attached to Xiao Ruofei. Xiao Ruofei smiled gently and said, "Hello, Manager Su. The vegetables are all prepared, they're in the garage, you can get the workers to move them." "Okay, okay. Thank you, Mr. Xia," Manager Su said quickly. It was obvious that Ling Xiaotian had given him instructions before he came, so Manager Su knew that Xiao Ruofei's paradise vegetables was of great importance to the company. Hence, his attitude was also very respectful, forming a sharp contrast with Yidong's domineering attitude the other day. Soon, Manager Su brought the driver and workers to move the 6 baskets of vegetables to the villa's courtyard. Manager Su's expression was full of excitement as she said to Ling Qingxue, "This paradise vegetables really lives up to its reputation. I've been in the procurement business for so many years, but this is the first time I've seen such high quality and good-looking vegetables. I believe that these famous paradise vegetables will definitely restore our flagship store's business to its original state, or even better than before." Ling Qingxue smiled and said, "Big Sister Su, I've already told my dad that Ruofei's vegetables are the best medicine for our company to get out of trouble. But that stubborn old man didn't believe me, or else why would he go through so much trouble?" Ling Qingxue should have a good relationship with Manager Su, so she didn't hold back when she spoke. However, as a subordinate, Manager Su also felt a little embarrassed when she heard Ling Qingxue say that about the chairman. She pursed her lips and smiled, not daring to respond. Soon, the vegetables were weighed by the pounds. Then, the price was calculated according to the price of 50 yuan for spinach and eggplant and 30 yuan for the other 4 vegetables. The total was more than 4,500 yuan. This price was almost half of the price given to the Moon Club in Shijiang. Furthermore, they provided 2 more kinds of vegetables. Xiao Ruofei was definitely very generous. Manager Su had also brought cash over and paid the money on the spot. Then, she instructed the workers to load the vegetables into the truck and politely bid Xiao Ruofei farewell. She left the holiday villa with the small truck. After Manager Su and the others left, only Xiao Ruofei and Ling Qingxue were left in the villa. Ling Qingxue smiled at Xiao Ruofei and said, "All right. Now that we're done with work, there's only the 2 of us left. What do you plan to do with me?" Ling Qingxue even blinked at Xiao Ruofei cutely. Looking at Ling Qingxue, who had obviously dressed up, Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but feel a little tempted. A long-legged beauty like Emma Yinlong was standing in front of him, looking at him with her beautiful eyes full of love. She didn't hide her love for him at all. As long as it was a normal man, he wouldn't be able to help but feel moved. However, Xiao Ruofei asked himself honestly. Even though he had a good impression of Ling Qingxue, it was far from the level of liking her. Moreover, Ling Qingxue had been hiding her feelings since middle school. At that time, Xiao Ruofei had no impression of Ling Qingxue at all. If he were to go with the flow now, Xiao Ruofei would feel that he was lying to his feelings. Thus, he touched his nose awkwardly and said, "Why don't you walk around or go into the house to watch TV while I prepare lunch?" Ling Qingxue chuckled and said, "It's only 8 o'clock now. Why are you preparing lunch so early in the morning? Do you want to stay in the kitchen for the whole morning?" Xiao Ruofei laughed in embarrassment. Without waiting for Xiao Ruofei to reply, Ling Qingxue continued, "I want to see the sea. You'll come with me?" Okay, Xiao Ruofei said. "Drive your car," Ling Qingxue said happily. Then, she graciously hooked her arm around Xiao Ruofei's and stuck her body close to him. Even though he was wearing a lot of clothes in the winter, Xiao Ruofei could still clearly feel the softness and elasticity of his arms. His body could not help but stiffen for a moment before he walked unnaturally towards the pickup truck. Xiao Ruofei's rented villa was about 3 kilometers away from the beach. It would only take a few minutes to drive there. The two of them did not speak after they got into the car, and the atmosphere was a little awkward. Xiao Ruofei said, let's listen to some songs. All right. Ling Qingxue said with a faint smile. Xiao Ruofei turned on the radio and a song started to play. You love it when I take you to see the sea, don't worry, relying on is love. Your happiness is the boat, I am the sea, I will send you to the future. The radio was playing Lu Yi's Take You to See the Sea. Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but be dumbfounded. Wasn't this too appropriate? The two of them drove to watch the sea. Coincidentally, this song was playing on the radio, and the lyrics were so explicit. Ling Qingshue's face also turned red. Then, she couldn't help but burst out laughing. She turned to look at Xiao Ruofei with a red face. Xiao Ruofei said awkwardly, I'll change the channel. I don't want to. This song is quite good. I like it, Ling Qingxue said with a smile. All right then, Xiao Ruofei smiled bitterly. Under Lu Yi's singing, neither of them spoke. Ling Qingshue's face had a hint of shyness and seemed to have a hint of sweetness. Xiao Ruofei, on the other hand, sat upright and still, focusing on driving. The atmosphere in the car was really ambiguous. Fortunately, the journey was not far. A few minutes later, the pickup truck stopped by the side of the road. The beach was just in front of them, so they could only walk there. The two of them got out of the car, and Ling Qingxue ran towards the beach like a child, her leather boots kicking up clouds of sand. Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but smile when he saw the scene and quickly chased after him. Very quickly, the two of them arrived at the beach. Ling Qingxue was extremely excited. If it wasn't winter, she might have already rushed into the water. The ocean breeze blew against Ling Qingshue's face, causing her hair to flutter. Under the warm winter sun, her delicate face looked even more beautiful. The two of them walked along the coastline, and the sound of waves rang in their ears. In front of them was the boundless blue sea, which made them feel relaxed and happy. The two of them chatted as they walked. They talked about their past in junior high school. They were in the same grade but were in different classes, so they naturally had a lot of interactions and some common friends. For example, when Xiao Ruofei mentioned the literary performance in the first 3 periods, Ling Qingxue was very excited and said that she had a solo dance. She even asked Xiao Ruofei if he remembered the girl who had danced Swan Lake. Although Xiao Ruofei's impression of him was vague, he was not stupid enough to tell the truth. Naturally, he nodded repeatedly. Ling Qingxue, on the other hand, was very familiar with some of Xiao Ruofei's basketball games in middle school, as if the scenes of that time were still vivid in her mind. They talked as they walked, and the distance between the two seemed to have closed a lot. After walking for about half an hour, Xiao Ruofei saw that Ling Qingxue was a little tired, so he said, "Qingxue, there's a rock over there. Let's go and sit down." "I'm taking a break." Ling Qingxue replied, "All right." The rock was a little steep. Xiao Ruofei took the lead and jumped up easily after a few steps. His strong figure made Ling Qingshue's eyes a little blurred. Xiao Ruofei turned around and extended her hand towards Ling Qingxue. She smiled and said, "What are you thinking? Quickly come up." Ling Qingxue came back to her senses and smiled sweetly as she reached out to grab Xiao Ruofei's big hand. Xiao Ruofei felt that Ling Qingshue's hands were very soft and smooth. He could not help but feel a little excited. After calming himself down, he gently pulled Ling Qingxue up. Then, Xiao Ruofei held Ling Qingshue's hand and climbed up with her. The two of them sat down at the highest point of the reef. Xiao Ruofei and Ling Qingxue faced the vast sea. Below them was a cliff that was more than 10 meters high. The cliff was grotesque and craggy. The waves hit the rocks, making loud sounds and splashing water. Even on the rocks that were more than 10 meters high, one could feel the dense water vapor. In such an environment, one's mood would suddenly become cheerful. The two of them sat there for a long time without speaking. After a long time, Ling Qingxue said softly, "Ruofei, we talked about so much about the school just now. Now, tell me about your army." "I want to hear, the army." Xiao Ruofei's eyes were filled with reminiscence. After a long while, he said softly, "Then let me tell you the story of a comrade. His name is Lin Hu, and he was born in a small fishing village not far from here. He and I were soldiers of the same year, and we were brought to the army on the same train. Many things about the Lone Wolf Commando team were confidential, but the fight with international drug dealers in China was not so sensitive. Central TV even sent reporters to interview the team and broadcast a documentary, but it was only after the military security department removed the secret. That was why Xiao Ruofei was describing the battle that had left a deep impression on him. The warm winter sun was a little dazzling. Xiao Ruofei looked at the sea in front of him and told the tragic story in a very low voice. In a trance, he felt as if he had returned to the wet jungle where poisonous snakes and insects were everywhere. The crisp sound of gunfire broke the silence of the jungle. The Lone Wolf Special Forces and the international drug trafficking gang were engaged in close combat, and bullets flew past them. "Blood Wolf! Be careful of the sniper!" Xiao Ruofei had just heard his comrade in arms, Hu Zi's roar when he was pushed away by a strong force. He rolled a few times involuntarily and hid behind a rock. Xiao Ruofei snapped back to reality and turned around. He saw that Hu Zi, who had pushed him away earlier, was lying on the ground. The large-caliber sniper bullet had pierced through his thigh and blood was gushing out like a fountain. "Hu Zi!" Xiao Ruofei shouted in grief and anger, and was about to rush forward to bandage Hu Zi. "Don't come over! The enemy sniper is watching us!" Hu Zi shouted. At the same time, a pair of big hands held Xiao Ruofei tightly in place. It was the Commander Guizhan who was commanding the battle at the side. "Wolf King!" Xiao Ruofei's eyes were bloodshot as he shouted, "The wolf's artery is injured. It'll die if it's not treated in time." As a Special Forces elite, Xiao Ruofei naturally knew that this was the most commonly used method of snipers: surround the point and hit the reinforcements. They kept the wounded alive and waited for their comrades to rush up and treat them. Then, they would use the sniper rifle to take down them one by one. However, the person lying on the ground was his best brother and comrade. Xiao Ruofei had lost his usual calmness. Without waiting for Guizhan to speak, Hu Zi, who had already lost a little too much blood, said weakly, "Bloody wolf. Ruofei. Don't come over. Don't come over. You coming over is meaningless. Except to die. Listen to me. Don't come over." Xiao Ruofei clutched the grass on the ground tightly, his eyes bloodshot. Hu Zi was bleeding non-stop, and the sound was getting weaker and weaker. Finally, the enemy sniper lost his patience and another sniper bullet hit Hu Zi's chest. He groaned and blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. "Are you Ruofei? Help me. Take care of my mother. And my sister." Hu Zi used the last of his strength and turned to look at Xiao Ruofei as he spoke with difficulty. A man's tears would not fall easily, but they had not reached a sad point. At this moment, Xiao Ruofei's tears were rolling down his cheeks. He said in a hoarse voice, "Hu Zi. In the future. Your mother is my mother. When Hu Zi heard this, a gratified smile appeared at the corners of his lips, and he slowly closed his eyes. Hu Zi, Xia Ruofei wailed. The sea breeze blew and Xia Ruofei felt a chill on his face. As he spoke, 2 lines of tears had unknowingly flowed down his face. Ling Qingxue was already leaning on him, her soft hands holding his big hands tightly, as if she wanted to give him strength. Ling Qingxue didn't say anything. She just held Xia Ruofei's hand quietly. She could feel the sorrow and helplessness in the heart of the man beside her when he was telling the heroic story. So he had gone through so much in the army all these years. Ling Qingxue thought to herself. At the same time, she felt her heart ache. The Prince Charming of the past seemed to have become different after being tempered by blood and fire in the military. He was more manly now. This feeling was especially strong when Xia Ruofei used a low voice to describe his life and death experiences with his comrades. Xia Ruofei calmed himself down and wiped his face with his hand. Then, he said, "I'm sorry. I just remembered something from the past." Ling Qingxue smiled and said gently, "Why are you embarrassed? I like to hear it. As long as it's related to you, I like to hear it." Xia Ruofei smiled and said in a lonely tone, "It's actually nothing much. It's nothing more than training and fighting. Our daily life is very monotonous, but we all enjoy it." "Then why did you leave the army?" Ling Qingxue asked in confusion. Xia Ruofei smiled and said, "For some personal reasons." "Forget it, let's not talk about this. It's getting late, let's go back. I still have to prepare lunch." Only then did Ling Qingxue realize that the 2 of them had been sitting there and chatting for almost 2 hours. Xia Ruofei held Ling Qingxue's hand and walked down. When they reached the bottom, Xia Ruofei was the first to jump down. Standing on the beach, he extended his hands to Ling Qingxue and said, "Come. I'll catch you." They were at a height of about 2 meters. Ling Qingxue felt a little scared instinctively, but when she saw Xia Ruofei's open arms and the warm smile on his face, she felt a sense of security. She smiled and nodded at Xia Ruofei before jumping off the rock. Xia Ruofei caught Ling Qingxue accurately. However, Ling Qingxue's jump seemed to be a little too strong, and the 2 of them were tightly hugging each other. Xia Ruofei could clearly feel 2 soft mounds pressing against his chest. His 2 hands were firmly pressed on Ling Qingxue's. Xia Ruofei could not help but feel his body stiffen. He quickly moved his hands away as if they were burning. Ling Qingxue's face turned red and she quickly let go of Xia Ruofei. Then, she glanced at Xia Ruofei and walked away with her head lowered. Xia Ruofei hurried to catch up with Ling Qingxue. The 2 of them didn't speak until they got into the pickup truck, and the awkward atmosphere was a little ambiguous. Pouted. 2103 Visit No. V. 3LB/N. CM for new OVL. Why are you acting dumb? I'm the one who's at a disadvantage, alright? After they got into the car, Ling Qingxue suddenly burst out laughing. Her face was red as she pouted. Why are you acting dumb? I'm the one who's at a disadvantage, alright? I'm sorry. I didn't do it on purpose. Xia Ruofei stuttered as he explained. Who knows? Ling Qingxue said in a low voice. She then raised her head and said, I don't care, you have to take responsibility. Ah. Xia Ruofei was shocked. It can't be. Didn't I just accidentally touch that part? However, Xia Ruofei did not dare to say this out loud. Otherwise, he would be beaten to death by Ling Qingxue. What wonderful things are you thinking about? Ling Qingxue glanced at Xiao Ruofei affectionately and said, I mean, you have to compensate me. Lunch must be a sumptuous meal. If I'm not satisfied. Humph. Xiao Ruofei quickly said. Don't worry. I'll definitely use all my skills. After saying this, Xiao Ruofei felt that it was awkward and ambiguous. He quickly added. And I've prepared a surprise for you. Oh, really? Hurry up and tell me. Ling Qingxue immediately couldn't hold back anymore and said. Xiao Ruofei smiled mysteriously and said. Since it's a surprise, you can't tell me in advance. You'll know when we get back. TSK. You're keeping me in suspense again. Ling Qingxue pouted and glared at Xiao Ruofei in dissatisfaction. Xiao Ruofei laughed and ignored Ling Qingxue. He started the car and drove back. After the ruckus just now, the awkward atmosphere between the two of them had disappeared. Moreover, the two of them had chatted for so long before, and they felt that the distance between their hearts had shortened a lot. Therefore, the journey back was filled with laughter and laughter. When they returned to the holiday villa, Ling Qingxue immediately pestered Xiao Ruofei for a surprise. Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, I was going to take it out after dinner, but since you're in such a hurry, then go get it now. Wait for me here. After he finished speaking, Xiao Ruofei ran upstairs. When he returned to his bedroom, Xiao Ruofei locked the door. Then, he contacted the spirit map space and took out a pot of all-encompassing brocade. When he was cutting yesterday, he had specially left 2 pots of succulent mother plants. One pot was for Liang Qichao's white-skinned lunar boundary, and the other was for Ling Qingshue's all-encompassing brocade. The 2 pots of succulent mother plants did not undergo cutting this time. After being nourished by the spirit map space and the petal solution, they had already recovered and were growing very energetically. Wanxiang, also known as the 12 Rolls of Hairy Men, had no stem. Its fleshy leaves were arranged in a loose lotus seat shape, and the leaves were slanted from the base, semi-circular in shape. As for the Wanxiang brocade, it was a variant of the Wanxiang brocade, with irregular stripes on its leaves. The rare thing about this pot of nature brocade was that it had both orange and pink mutated stripes. These 2 colored mutated stripes were extremely rare to begin with, and it was even rarer to have both of them on a body. Its value was no less than that of the top-grade ice lantern. Xiao Ruofei used his mind to take out a watering can and watered the all-encompassing brocade with some water from the spatial pond. Then, he kept the watering can and went downstairs with the flower pot. Downstairs, Ling Qingxue was looking forward to it. When she saw Xiao Ruofei coming down, she immediately ran over. When she saw the flower pot in Xiao Ruofei's hand, her eyes lit up. Then, she couldn't move her eyes away and stared at the Wanxiang brocade for a long time before she said excitedly. Dual-colored Wanxiang brocade? And they were orange and pink. Oh my god. Ruofei, where did you get so many high-quality goods? The ice lantern from last time was already very rare, and this time, you're bringing out such a rare dual-colored striped all-nature brocade. Ling Qingxue had always loved succulent plants, so much so that her admirers, including Liang Qichao, Lu Ping, Lu Mingho, and the others, had also begun to study succulents. Therefore, such a top-grade all-nature brocade was a fatal temptation to her. Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, A present for you. How was it? Are you surprised enough? For me? Sure enough, Ling Qingshue's eyes revealed a look of pleasant surprise. This seems too expensive. It's at least a few $100,000. Xiao Ruofei said deliberately. You don't want it? Then I'll take it back. With that, Xiao Ruofei pretended to turn around and go upstairs. Ling Qingxue hurriedly snatched the pot of all-encompassing brocade and held it in her arms. Who said I didn't want it? There was no reason to take back something that had been given away. Humph. You little brat. Xiao Ruofei didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I've spent so much effort to prepare a gift for you, but in the end, it's still not good. You've actually become a petty person. Ling Qingshue's eyes flashed with a hint of a smile. You talk too much. Hurry up and prepare your lunch. If you're not satisfied, I'm not leaving. Then, she hugged the flower pot and used her shoulder to push Xiao Ruofei towards the kitchen. Xiao Ruofei quickly said, Don't push me, don't push me. I'll go now, all right? With that, Xiao Ruofei fled into the kitchen. Ling Qingxue giggled as she looked at Xiao Ruofei's back and muttered to herself. This guy is quite thoughtful. Ling Qingshue's heart was filled with sweetness. She held the flower pot in her hands and walked to the living room to sit down on the sofa. Her eyes fell on the all-creation brocade, and her eyes revealed an indescribable joy. Xiao Ruofei had indeed given it his all to prepare a sumptuous lunch. The main ingredients were naturally Taoyuan vegetables from the spirit map space. There were also some meat dishes that he had bought from the supermarket when he went to Chongping County yesterday. When the two of them were eating, Xiao Ruofei had prepared 7 to 8 dishes. With the unique ingredients, even though Xiao Ruofei's cooking skills were only passable, the dishes he made still looked, smelled, and tasted great. Especially the ingredients, they were fresh and tender, which made people hungry. Xiao Ruofei laid out the dishes in the dining room and called for her twice before Ling Qingxue reluctantly put down the plate of all-creation brocade and went to the dining room to eat. However, the attraction of the peach garden vegetables quickly diverted Ling Qingxue's attention. It's so delicious. Ling Qingxue spoke as she ate, not caring about her image as a lady. Xiao Ruofei smiled and gave Ling Qingxue some food. He said, Eat slowly, no one here is snatching it from you. Yes, yes. You should eat too. Ling Qingxue said. Only then did Xiao Ruofei pick up his bowl and start eating. He had been eating these vegetables every day, but he did not feel as strongly about it as Ling Qingxue. However, the delicious peach garden vegetables still greatly increased his appetite. Ling Qingxue picked up a small piece of cabbage and put it in her mouth. After chewing it carefully, she revealed a surprised expression and said, This little cabbage seems to be a little different from the other dishes. The taste is even more delicious and the texture is much better. Xiao Ruofei was stunned for a moment, but he quickly remembered that the cabbage was planted in the spirit map space to test the effect of the petal solution. The cabbage seeds had been soaked in the diluted petal solution, so it might have undergone some kind of mutation. He also took a bite of the cabbage and put it in his mouth. Sure enough, it felt slightly different from ordinary vegetables from paradise. The crisp texture and the delicious taste that made one's teeth taste delicious were all memorable. Ling Qingxue put down her chopsticks and said, I don't think there's any cabbage among the vegetables you supply to our company, right? Tell me the truth, what's going on? Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, What else could it be? This little cabbage is our latest developed species. We only brought a few samples over today. I was thinking of trying it out, but I didn't expect it to taste so good. Ling Qingshue's eyes lit up and she said, Another new item. I don't care, you have to give priority to our company's supply of this little cabbage. Xiao Ruofei smiled bitterly. This is really in the research and development stage. We've only brought a few samples today. Then when can we get the goods? Ling Qingxue persevered and asked, I don't need too much. Just like the other vegetables, 20 to 30 caddies a day shouldn't be a problem, right? At least 10 days. Xiao Ruofei said after some thought. All right. 10 days it is. Ling Qingxue said, in 10 days, our company will be the first to receive this cabbage. Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, don't worry. But let me make this clear first. The cabbages we ate today were cultivated under the careful care of the laboratory. The quality of the mass-produced products may be slightly worse than this. Xiao Ruofei wanted to gradually plant them in the outside world. When the time came, the first batch of cabbage would be from the batch that was grown in the backyard. Although they had also been soaked in the petal solution, the outside environment was not like the spirit map space. The quality of the vegetables would definitely be reduced. He was also giving Ling Qingxue a heads up in case her expectations were too high. It doesn't matter. I know it won't be too bad. Ling Qingxue said, when I get back, I'll ask my father to change the contract and add the supply of cabbage. All right, you decide. Xiao Ruofei said with a smile. He didn't even mention the price, and he was completely at ease with Ling Qingxue. Ling Qingxue was very satisfied with this lunch. After eating, the two of them went out for a walk to digest their food. The vegetables in the peach garden were simply too delicious, and Ling Qingxue was a little full. The two of them chatted as they walked. Ruofei, when are you going to start your vegetable base? Ling Qingxue asked, now that your business has started, if you don't build your vegetable base as soon as possible, it will still be a small business. I've been thinking about it, but I don't have any leads yet. Xiao Ruofei said. Yup. Starting from zero is indeed a complicated thing, Ling Qingxue sighed. Then, she looked at the barren land in front of the villa, and her eyes suddenly lit up. Actually, this place is pretty good. You see. Although the land in front of and behind your villa is deserted, it's very flat. If you use large machinery for construction, it won't be difficult to build a farm. This piece of land was at least 20 to 30 mu. The early stage was definitely enough. Moreover, there was the sea in front and a mountain forest behind. If they rented it together, it would not be a problem to develop fruit tree planting or marine breeding in the future. By the way, I saw an abandoned pond when I came here. It's okay to keep fish. Hearing this, Xiao Ruofei's mind started to wander. He took a closer look and realized that it was true. Other than the fact that the land was overgrown with weeds and a little barren, it was the perfect place to build a vegetable base. And with the spiritual pond water and the petal solution, the barren land was not a problem at all. Moreover, there was a road next to it, so he didn't even have to worry about transportation problems. It was simply tailor-made. If they really took over this land, it would not be as simple as a vegetable base. Xiao Ruofei had the spirit map space, and there were countless possibilities for his future development. Those priceless flowers, trees, the world's best food ingredients, extremely expensive medicinal herbs. All of these needed a base as a fulcrum. This place was undoubtedly very suitable as the starting point of his career. Qingxue, what you said makes sense. Xiao Ruofei said excitedly, I'll find out where this land belongs to and find a way to rent it. N. Ling Qingxue was very happy that her idea had helped Xiao Ruofei. She thought for a while and said, oh right, when you're doing construction work, you can directly look for Liang Qichao. His family is in the real estate development business, so he has a construction team and construction machinery ready. When the time comes, ask him to find a designer to help you plan. All right. Xiao Ruofei said happily, Qingxue, you're a lucky star. You've helped me solve a problem that has been bothering me for a long time. Ling Qingxue smiled and said, then you have to thank me properly. You owe me another meal. No. How about 2 meals? No problem. Xiao Ruofei readily agreed. Whenever you want to eat Taoyuan vegetables, just come up. N. Ling Qingxue nodded happily. The two of them chatted as they walked. They walked around the villa and took a good look at the piece of land. Then, they walked back to the villa to check on Ling Qingxue. After all, she still had work to do and it was time to leave. Back at the villa, Ling Qingxue went over and carefully carried the pot of nature brocade and walked out. Xiao Ruofei wanted to help but couldn't. He had to carry it himself. As she walked to the door, Ling Qingxue did not see the small aluminum alloy door sill at the door because of the flower pot blocking her view. She tripped on it and couldn't help but let out a cry of surprise. Her whole body fell forward, and the pot of all nature brocade flew out of her hand. Xiao Ruofei was right beside Ling Qingxue. His reaction speed was far beyond that of ordinary people. The moment Ling Qingxue tripped over the door frame, his body had already moved as fast as lightning. A hand firmly held the bottom of the flower pot and then gently turned a circle, using the force, unloading technique of Tai Chi to stop the forward momentum of the flower pot. The flower pot seemed to be stuck to his palm. His other hand was tightly wrapped around Ling Qingxue's slender waist. Ling Qingxue's face was still filled with fear, but she realized that she did not fall. Instead, she was being held tightly in Xiao Ruofei's arms. At this moment, her body was being pulled by Xiao Ruofei, and she was leaning back slightly. Xiao Ruofei was also leaning forward, and their faces were almost touching. Ling Qingxue's heart skipped a beat, and her face turned red. Under the warm winter sun, Xiao Ruofei's face seemed to be covered with a layer of radiance. He asked with concern, "Are you all right?" However, Xiao Ruofei did not realize how intimate their current position was. Ling Qingxue's heart was beating fast. She looked at Xiao Ruofei's face, which was so close to her, and did something very bold. She reached out and held the back of Xiao Ruofei's head, then pressed her tender red lips against Xiao Ruofei's. No matter how fast Xiao Ruofei's reaction was, he did not expect such a situation. He could not avoid it. He was stunned, as if he had been electrocuted. His eyes were wide open, and the two of them looked at each other at such a close distance. Xiao Ruofei felt two wet and soft lips pressed against his own. It was a wonderful feeling, as if an electric current had passed through his body. However, this strange feeling didn't last long. Ling Qingxue quickly let go of him. At that moment, Ling Qingxue's pretty face was as red as a ripe apple. She was like a frightened deer as she quickly walked towards the Porsche 911 that she had parked in the villa's yard. Xiao Ruofei was still standing there like a statue. Ling Qingxue was walking halfway when she suddenly turned back. She looked shy and did not even dare to look at Xiao Ruofei. She took the flower pot from Xiao Ruofei's hand and got into the car as if she was escaping. Before Xiao Ruofei could return to her senses, Ling Qingxue had already driven away in her Porsche 911. Xiao Ruofei touched his fragrant lips, still in a daze from what had happened. I was actually forced to kiss by this girl? Xiao Ruofei felt like he was in a dream. After a while, he shouted in grief and indignation, Ling Qingxue. This is my first kiss, P.S. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day. I especially offer Brother Xiao's first kiss. I wish the lovers a happy ending and that the single dog will get rid of his single soon. Steel Gun went on a date. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. Xiao Ruofei did not leave the villa for the next few days. He wasn't in a hurry to rent the land. He planned to wait for the cabbages in the backyard to ripen and confirmed that soaking the cabbages in the petal solution could greatly improve the quality of the vegetables. Of course, at the same time, it was also because he had to be busy with the sale of the succulents for the next few days. Now that he was alone, there were too many things to take care of. However, Xiao Ruofei had been rather carefree these few days. After forcing a kiss on Xiao Ruofei that day, Ling Qingxue seemed to be a little embarrassed. She did not even call him these few days. The person who came to pick up the food every morning had been replaced by a purchaser from Ling Ji's food and beverage department. Other than preparing the Taoyuan vegetables for Shijiang Moon Club and Ling Ji restaurant every day, Xiao Ruofei would tend to the cabbage in the backyard, enter the spirit map space to harvest the vegetables at a fixed time, take care of the young fish in the fish pond, and the precious red arowana. On the second day after Ling Qingxue left, the cabbage seedlings had already reached the planting conditions. Xiao Ruofei had already opened up 2 vegetable fields in the backyard. He planted the seedlings carefully in the vegetable field and watered them with normal tap water mixed with a small amount of pebble solution every day. This was also to simulate the situation of large-scale planting in the future. Although there was a spring at the bottom of the spirit pond, the water in the spirit pond could not be used up endlessly. The space was already showing a thriving scene, and the peach garden vegetables could be harvested every day. In addition to the first 6 kinds of vegetables, the pumpkins, carrots, cabbages, and Chinese yam that were purchased later had also entered the harvest period. After expanding the planting, it was more than enough to supply Shijiangyue and Ling Ji restaurant. However, as the planting area expanded, Xiao Ruofei felt a little strained. After all, the vegetables here grew very fast, and he was only one person. He was reaching his limit. If he expanded the scale, he would not be able to do it. Hence, Xiao Ruofei decided to plant his vegetables, fruits in the outside world as much as possible. The spirit map space would be used to grow valuable crops with high economic value, such as precious Chinese medicinal herbs and wood. Xiao Ruofei had no intention of expanding the space fish pond. The fish inside were mainly for him and his friends to eat. At most, he would take out a small amount to sell as a premium product. If you want to make a lot of money, you still have to raise precious species, whether it's ornamental fish or edible fish. The high-end path is the king. The ecosystem in the fish pond had started to function normally. The small fish, shrimp, and plankton were growing very quickly in the spirit pool. The fish pond was now self-sufficient and did not need Xiao Ruofei to feed it. In the past few days, the fry had obviously grown bigger. Grass carp grew quite fast. Usually, a 2-year-old fish could reach a weight of 1 or 2 caddies, and a 3-year-old fish was already very big. The time flow in the space was 20 times faster than the outside world. 2 or 3 months in the space was equivalent to 3 or 4 years in the outside world. The red arowana was enjoying itself in the pond. Every day, Xiao Ruofei would drip a few drops of the pebble solution into the fish. It looked even more radiant. The red color on its gills was getting thicker. Its scales were tight and dense. Each piece was huge and there were signs of a second color. 4 days had passed in the outside world. Xiao Ruofei realized that all the succulents had survived and had grown a lot. These seedlings were all qualified for long-distance transportation. Hence, Xiao Ruofei decided to put them on sale. This time, Xiao Ruofei was familiar with the process and took a photo of the new succulent sapling. After taking the photos, Xiao Ruofei carefully selected 20 pots of succulent seedlings to be used as mother plants to continue strengthening his succulent army. He arranged the remaining 160 pots of succulent seedlings in different categories, counted the number of each kind of succulent seedling, and recorded it. Then, he left the spirit map space with a thought. The next step was a series of tedious work, such as selecting the photos, uploading them, pricing, setting the inventory, and so on. It was already late at night when he was done. As they had already announced that the succulents would be put on the shelves at 8 a.m. the next day, Xiao Ruofei did not rush to announce it. Instead, he washed up and went to bed. The next morning, Xiao Ruofei first prepared the vegetables for both stores. After they had picked up the vegetables, he went to the computer in the bedroom upstairs and prepared to put the new batch of succulent seedlings on the shelf. Xiao Ruofei didn't know that at the same time, many people in the country were staring at their computers, waiting for the 3-star Taoyuan Roti to release a new product. In Chengcheng City, southern Yunnan province, a fat middle-aged man was staring at the computer screen. At this time, his phone on the table rang. Fatty's eyes didn't leave the screen. He picked up the phone and pressed the answer button. "Hello. Old Huang. I'm not going today. I can't leave now." At this time, Fatty, who was habitually refreshing the web page, suddenly saw that the page had changed. He quickly said, "Let's not talk about it. I have important things to do. I'll contact you later." After saying that, he didn't even have time to press the hang-up button. He directly threw the phone to the side, and then nimbly moved the mouse to start choosing. Adding the shopping cart, the combined payment, and the settlement all took less than 2 minutes. Seeing that his order had appeared in the back end and was waiting to be sent out, the fat man heaved a long sigh of relief. He picked up the cup and took a big gulp of water. In Fengtian City of Liaodong Province, everyone had just started work. Some were leisurely reading a newspaper while sipping tea, while others quickly opened a novel website and began reading. LL News Tirais at N0V/LBI/.cm. A young man in his 20s did not even take off his bag. He sat in front of his computer and stared nervously at the Taoyuan butcher shop's page, constantly refreshing it. When the new goods were displayed, the young man quickly looked through them, and then without hesitation, he chose a few of them and paid for them. Similar scenes were happening in many places across the country. 3 minutes later, a post appeared on Baidu Meet Tieba. The title was Taoyuan Meat Stall's new goods are on the shelves. Did you manage to grab them today? In the post, the original poster wrote. Recently, the mysterious Taoyuan Roti stall had been spamming the bar. The succulent seedlings sold in this new online store were all 1 in a million high-quality products, and everyone expressed their envy, jealousy, and hatred for the first batch of customers who bought the succulent seedlings. 5 days ago, Taoyuan Roti had announced that they would be releasing new goods at 8 a.m. today. Many of the forum members had sent out information posts, and the OP, who still had some spare money on hand, wanted to pick a pot of succulent seedlings to improve his image. The OP entered the online shop on time, but he hesitated for a moment whether to buy a tortoise shell peony or a white-skinned lunar boundary. After comparing it repeatedly for a while, it was sold out. This was a top-grade succulent seedling that was worth hundreds or even thousands of yuan, not some cabbage. There were clearly 20 to 30 pots in stock a minute ago, but they were all sold out in an instant. Can we still be friends happily? At the end of the post, the OP used a big crying emoji to express his feelings at the moment. Not long after this post was posted, the number of replies shot up. I didn't get it either. I was delayed by 3 minutes in parking the car downstairs. I'm crying. La 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 la. A basin of top-grade Wanxiang brocade is already in my hands. I look forward to the day I receive it. Previous poster, you're pulling aggro. Those who also slipped and didn't get it expressed strong indignation. There are so many rich people in China. It's like it's free. This shop is on fire. I didn't buy it, I didn't buy it, I didn't buy it. I'll say the sad thing 3 times. The shop owner is too despicable. Why did he have to do hunger marketing? Shopkeeper, come out now. I promise I won't beat you to death. There were too many monks and too few gruel. In the end, the majority of people didn't buy it. These people naturally left messages one after another, and those who bought it also began to share screenshots of their orders. They were having fun, and this post quickly became a hot post in the bar. Usually, when some businesses came to the meat bar to advertise, their posts would be locked by the owner. Only the post of Taoyuan Meat Shop was not locked. Instead, it was pinned to the top. Xiao Ruofei naturally didn't know that his Taoyuan butcher shop had already caused so much discussion in the Tens Hotieba, a place where players gathered. He only saw that the number of orders in the back end of Taobao was rapidly increasing. This time, there were more than 160 pots of succulents of various species on sale, but they were all sold out in just 2 minutes. It was obvious that the buyers were waiting in front of the computer in advance and would start fighting when the time came. He earned 150,000 in 2 minutes? Xiao Ruofei was dumbfounded. P.S. Here comes the second chapter. How was everyone's Chinese Valentine's Day? Single dogs can consider joining a book group. There are so many cute girls. Group number 300-769-830. Finally, I'd like to ask for clicks, favorites, and recommendations. My new book is still a seedling, and I need everyone's love. The succulent saplings produced by Taoyuan Butcher Shop were far more popular than Xiao Ruofei had imagined. Many succulent players who had not bought them left comments in the online store, strongly requesting the store owner to replenish his stock. Xiao Ruofei fell into deep thought. He felt that he should change the model a little in the future. The next time he cut, he would definitely cultivate more succulent seedlings. This time, he had reserved more than 20 pots to cultivate into the mother plant. When the next batch of products was put on the shelves, they couldn't put them all out in one go. They had to be separated into batches. Otherwise, they would have to wait for 10 to 20 days every time they ran out of stock, and the consumer's patience would soon be worn out. Moreover, the succulents would grow with every day they stayed in the medium. Xiao Ruofei could definitely sell them at a higher price. However, it was already like this. No matter how capable Xiao Ruofei was, it was impossible for him to produce new succulents. Hence, he could only put up another announcement to inform everyone that there would be a new round of sales in 15 days. Then, Xiao Ruofei downloaded the Express form template from SF Express's official website and filled in the order information one by one. Then, he printed the Express form that he had retrieved last time and printed the order. Xiao Ruofei took out a stack of printed orders, took out the spirit map scroll, and entered the space. He started to pack them according to the order information. More than 160 pots of succulents were divided into about 60 orders. Xiao Ruofei had to work for more than 3 hours in the interspace before he could finish all of them. More than 60 paper boxes were tightly sealed. Every box was stuffed with shockproof foam strips, and the succulent plants inside were also tightly wrapped in bubble bags. A printed express delivery form was directly pasted on the outside of the box. After Xiao Ruofei left the spirit map space, he kept the painting close to his body. Then, he went to the garage downstairs and took out all the boxes that he had packed. Then, Xiao Ruofei called Shunfeng Express's Chongping County branch and asked them to send a car over as soon as possible. At the same time, he asked them to bring some blank express forms over. Today, he had used up more than half of the 100 express forms he had collected last time. By the time the express delivery company took away the boxes, the morning had passed. Xiao Ruofei looked at the delivery company's small truck as it drove away. Thinking that he would be able to earn 150 to 160,000 yuan very soon, he was naturally in a good mood. After lunch, Xiao Ruofei started to consider renting the surrounding villas. He thought that Wu Liqian's relative was able to get a piece of land here, probably because of Wu Liqian's relationship. That was why the other party was so forthright when he rented the house. It seemed that he had to ask Wu Liqian about this matter. After Xiao Ruofei made up his mind, he took out his phone and called Wu Liqian. "Hello, little Xiao. Wu Liqian answered the phone and said enthusiastically. Sis Wu, you sound like you're on cloud 9. Are you going to be promoted soon? Xiao Ruofei asked half jokingly. Wu Liqian laughed and said, I'm just a secretary, how high can I be promoted? Then, Wu Liqian lowered her voice and said, but there might be some changes in work recently. The boss's matter has basically been decided, and the organization has already spoken to him. Xiao Ruofei was stunned. He didn't expect that his joke would hit the mark. Tian Huilan's promotion to the Standing Committee of the Provincial Party Committee and the Three Mountain Police had always been popular. Now it seemed that this matter was already set in stone. Otherwise, no matter how good his personal relationship with the Tian family was, Wu Liqian would not have leaked such news. Xiao Ruofei then thought of something else. Usually, when a leader was transferred out, the secretary wouldn't be taken away. In Tian Huilan's case, she was promoted on the spot. Logically, Wu Liqian could also follow Tian Huilan to the Municipal Party Committee. However, from Wu Liqian's tone, it didn't seem to be as simple as transferring from the government to the Municipal Party Committee. Xiao Ruofei thought for a moment and then smiled. Sis Wu, are you going to be released? Then I must congratulate you in advance. Wu Liqian was obviously in a good mood. She smiled and said, Yo. Your nose is quite sharp. They're really being released. Congratulations. Xiao Ruofei quickly said, Sis Wu, is it convenient for you to reveal where you're going? Xiao Ruofei knew that the mayor's secretary would not be too bad, especially since Tian Huilan had raised her rank on the spot. Sure enough, Wu Liqian smiled and said in a low voice, the organization is preparing to let me take on the position of deputy head of the Changping district, but it hasn't been decided yet. Xiao Ruofei immediately said, then I really have to congratulate you. Sis Wu, you'll be like a dragon entering the ocean, you can do whatever you want now. In general, the position arrangement of the mayor's secretary would be different according to the level of the secretary. Wu Liqian should be at the deputy level. At her level, there was a lot of attention paid to the position arrangement. An ordinary deputy position in the administrative bureau was naturally different from the deputy position in the county below. It was already a good arrangement to be appointed as a deputy county head, not to mention that Wu Liqian was also an executive deputy county head. She was directly promoted to the Standing Committee of the County Party Committee, which was naturally worthy of congratulations. Anyone with a discerning eye could tell that Wu Liqian's position was only a transition. With Tian Huilan's help in the city, it wouldn't be difficult for her to make achievements in the position of executive deputy county head. By then, she would naturally be adjusted to the main level and even have experience in holding a position at the grassroots. I'm counting on your blessings. Wu Liqian said with a smile, then asked, Oh right, Xia, did you need something from me today? There's something I need to trouble you with. Xiao Ruofei said, but if you want to take up a position in Changping County, I don't know if it'll be convenient. What's the matter first? Wu Liqian laughed. Even if I work in Changping County, I still have connections with the municipal government. Sis Wu, you've misunderstood. Xiao Ruofei said, I wanted to rent the land near this holiday villa to build a vegetable base. I wanted to ask you about the situation. Now that you're coming to Changping County to take up a position, and it's at this time, I'm just afraid it'll be a little inconvenient. Wu Liqian laughed and said, So that's what it is. Xiao Xia, you're worrying too much. You want to invest in Changping County and support our economic development. This is a good thing. What's so inconvenient about it? Sis Wu, you're getting into the situation pretty quickly. Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, as expected of the mayor's secretary. You have a high level of insight. You bastard. If you dare to laugh at me again, I won't help you. Wu Liqian said angrily. Xiao Ruofei quickly replied, I don't dare. In the future, my vegetable base will be in your Chongping County, and you will be my official. I wouldn't dare to laugh at you. All right, let's not joke around anymore. The land you're talking about belongs to the Dongqing village of Jianggang town. Wu Liqian smiled and said, how about this, Xia? I'll talk to the people in charge of Jianggang town and give you a call. You can contact them directly. It'll be fine. All right. I'm relieved to hear that. Xiao Ruofei said happily, thank you, Sis Wu. Your favorite ovals. Not long after Xiao Ruofei hung up the phone, Wu Liqian called back and told him that she had already contacted him. She asked him to go directly to Jianggang town's deputy mayor Wu and send him his phone number through text message. Just as Xiao Ruofei was about to call Deputy Mayor Wu, he received a call from Shijiangyu's President Zheng. It turned out that the Peach Blossom Company and the brand registration had been completed. Xiao Ruofei was overjoyed. He was preparing to rent land and start the construction of the farm. The company was registered just like that. What a timely move! This way, he could directly rent the land under the company's name. Xiao Ruofei immediately drove to the West River Moon Club and went to President Zheng to get the company's registration materials, business license, and other things. President Zheng's work was very meticulous. He had prepared the company's official seal, public account, and so on. Considering that Xiao Ruofei had yet to start a business, he had put the company's registered address in an office building under his name. In the future, when Xiao Ruofei had really built the company, he would just have to change the address again. Xiao Ruofei expressed his gratitude to President Zheng and returned the favor. He said that he could appropriately increase the supply of the paradise vegetables from next week. He had already expanded the planting in the interspace, and it would not be a problem to increase the supply by 10 to 20%. President Zheng was overjoyed. He said that he wanted to treat Xiao Ruofei to dinner and treat him well. However, Xiao Ruofei still remembered the matter of renting land, so he declined tactfully. After signing a new supply agreement with the West River Moon Club under the name of the Paradise Corporation, Xiao Ruofei left the West River Moon Club with the relevant documents of his company. Xiao Ruofei found his pickup truck in the parking lot, but he was not in a hurry to drive. Instead, he took out his phone and called Deputy Mayor Wu. After the call was connected, a reserved voice came from the other end. I'm Wu Gang. Who's this? Is it Mayor Wu? Xiao Ruofei said, I'm Xiao Ruofei. Director Wu from the city government asked me to call you. Once Xiao Ruofei said the words Director Wu, Deputy Mayor Wu immediately became enthusiastic and said, so it's Mr. Xia. Hello. Director Wu has already told me about you. There won't be any problems. Mayor Wu, thank you very much, Xiao Ruofei said with a smile. Where? Mr. Xia is too polite. Wu Gang said humbly, after Director Wu's instructions, I immediately went to understand the situation. The land you mentioned is the collective land of Dongqing Village, and it has been barren for several years. You're willing to invest in a farm there to generate income for Dongqing Village and to support our town's economic development. We should thank you. Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but smile. These government officials were really good at talking. The same thing could have two different results when it came to them. No matter which one it was, they could explain it clearly and logically, making people feel that it was really reasonable. The two of them made an appointment to go to the Dongqing Village Committee tomorrow morning to settle the land lease. Actually, Wu Gang could have just informed Dongqing Village and let Xiao Ruofei go there by himself. However, this matter was personally handled by Wu Liqian. There were no secrets in the officialdom. Wu Gang had long heard that Wu Liqian was going to be demoted to the deputy head of Chongping County. When the time came, Wu Liqian would be his direct superior. So, Wu Gang did this to show that he valued her. The next day, after sending off the trucks of Shi Jianyue and Ling Ji, Xiao Ruofei drove to the village council of Dongqing Village, which was not far from the holiday villa. The deputy mayor of Jianggang Town, Wu Gang, had arrived long ago. Wu Gang looked to be in his early 30s. He had a slicked, back hairstyle and had a burly figure. He had the air of a leader. Beside Wu Gang stood a man in his 50s or 60s. He was wearing blue coarse clothes. His face, which had been eroded by the sea breeze, was dark and rough, and full of wrinkles. However, his eyes were very bright, revealing a sense of shrewdness and slyness. Once Xiao Ruofei got out of the car, he quickly walked over and said, "Mayor Wu, I'm sorry for the delay." "It's all right, I just arrived," said Wu Gang with a smile. "Mr. Xia, let me introduce you. This is Ruan Fugui, the village director of Dongqing Village. Old Ruan, this is Mr. Xia." Ruan Fugui quickly wiped his hands on his clothes and reached out to Xiao Ruofei. "Mr. Xia, nice to meet you." Xiao Ruofei shook hands with Ruan Fugui and smiled. "Uncle Ruan, Mayor Wu should have told you why I'm here, right? The mayor said that you're interested in renting the idle land in our village." "This is great news." Ruan Fugui said, "Come in, please. Let's talk at the village committee." The three of them walked into the village council building and Ruan Fugui quickly made tea for them. Then, he sat down and said, "Mr. Xia, I'm sure there's no problem with renting the land to you. It's idle now. However, a few years ago, we approved a piece of land for a house on that piece of land. A house has already been built on it, and the land you want is all around this house." Speaking of this, Ruan Fugui couldn't help but look at Wu Gang again. It was very likely that Wu Gang had helped Wu Liqian's relatives approve this piece of land. Xiao Ruofei smiled. "That's not a problem. I'm living in that villa now. I'm planning to build a farm with that villa as the center." Ruan Fugui immediately heaved a sigh of relief and said, "Then there's no problem." Then, he stood up and took out a map. He pointed it out to Xiao Ruofei and said, "Mr. Xia, this piece of land has been marked with a red line. We were planning to build a village farm, but the investment funds were not enough, so the project failed, but the land was also left there. Can you see if there's any problem with the designated area?" Xiao Ruofei took the map and looked at it seriously. In the special forces, it was basic homework to recognize the map. Moreover, it was a military map that was many times more complicated than this simple map. Hence, Xiao Ruofei easily found the location of his villa and compared it to the range of the red line. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and said, "Uncle Ruan, there is no problem if you go west to the seaside. As for the east, I'm also very interested in this mountain forest. I want to rent it together with my land. I wonder if the ownership belongs to the village?" Ruan Fugui immediately said, "That mountain forest belongs to the village. It's just a barren mountain. Some villagers wanted to develop it and plant fruit trees, but it seems that there is a problem with the soil. It is difficult for the fruit trees to survive, and even if they manage to grow, the fruits are sour and astringent, and can't be eaten at all. Mr. Xia, do you want to consider it again?" Xiao Ruofei smiled. "It's all right. I have another use for this place." Ruan Fugui had reminded Xiao Ruofei of his duty, but Xiao Ruofei had to insist on it. If he lost money in the future, the town leaders wouldn't blame him. Therefore, he thought for a while and nodded. "Mr. Xia, since you insist on it, I'll rent it to you as well." Ruan Fugui couldn't help but rub his hands. He hesitated and said, Mr. Xia, the market price is about 3,800 yuan per mu, but you're personally introduced by Mayor Wu. So, 3,500 yuan per mu. When he said this, Ruan Fugui sneaked a glance at Wu Gang, who hadn't said anything the entire time. He saw Wu Gang's brows furrow without a trace, so Ruan Fugui quickly changed his words and said, every mu. 3,300, no. What do you think of 3,200? At this moment, Wu Gang's expression had returned to normal. There was even a faint smile on his face. Ruan Fugui secretly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. It wasn't easy for him to be a village official. If the rent was too cheap, the villagers would definitely not do it. But if the rent was too expensive, the leader would not be satisfied. Fortunately, the price of 3,200 yuan was clearly acceptable to Wu Gang, and the village could barely accept it. Xiao Ruofei had seen all of this. Before he came, he had also checked the rental price of land in Chongqing County. In the coastal areas, this price was considered quite favorable. Hence, he nodded and said, sure. Ruan Fugui smiled and said, Mr. Xia, this is the price of the land. It's much cheaper to buy a mountain forest. The soil and water in our mountain forest are average, so 1,500 yuan per mu a year, is that okay? Xiao Ruofei said readily, all right. We'll go with your price. Ruan Fugui said happily, as long as Mr. Xia is satisfied. This piece of land is a total of 28.3 mu, so let's take it as 28 mu. The annual rent is 89,600 yuan, and the mountain forest is about 15 mu, so the annual rent is 22,500 yuan. The total annual rent is 112,100 yuan, is that okay? Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but take another look at Ruan Fugui. This old man didn't look very good, but his brain worked very quickly. Although it was just simple math, he was indeed capable to be able to calculate it so quickly. To be able to become the village director, he definitely had some skill. No problem. Xiao Ruofei nodded and said, Uncle Ruan, I've even brought the company seal. Let's sign the contract. All right, all right. Ruan Fugui quickly said. Then, he called the village accountant and asked him to come over immediately. There was a computer in the village council with the model contract of the previous rented land. He could just pull it out and modify the parameters. However, only the young accountants in the village council knew how to use a computer. At this time, Wu Gang, who had not clearly interfered with the negotiations, smiled and said, Lao Ruan, since Mr. Xia is planning to develop a farm in Dongqing village, should we extend the lease period? Ruan Fugui said, Mayor Wu, our lease is usually for 3 years, and in principle, it can't exceed 5 years. But since you've spoken, then, what do you think about the contract lasting 8 years? Wu Gang smiled and looked at Xiao Ruofei, asking for his opinion. Xiao Ruofei also knew that Wu Gang was helping him. He immediately nodded and said, all right. Uncle Ruan, I can't take advantage of the village. If we sign an 8-year contract, the annual rent will be increased by 5% on the basis of the previous year. In addition, I hope to write a clause in the contract that our company will have the priority to lease the land under the same conditions when the contract expires. Ruan Fugui had thought that the 8-year lease would end immediately, so he felt a little heartache. When he heard Xiao Ruofei suggest an increase in rent, he immediately smiled and said, no problem, no problem. Everyone waited for a while, and the village accountant arrived at the village council. There was a ready-made lease contract on the computer. After some changes to the rent, terms, and conditions, it was printed out directly and signed by both parties. Then, the seals of the Peach Blossom Company and the Dongqing Village Council were stamped, and the lease contract was considered to be in effect. After both parties kept the contract, Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "Mayor Wu, Uncle Ruan, I really have to thank you for this. How about this? Let's have lunch together and celebrate our successful cooperation." Ruan Fugui said, "Mr. Xiao, you're helping our village develop its economy. If you want to eat, we'll treat you. Why don't you and Mayor Wu have a meal at my house? My wife's cooking skills are pretty good." Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, "Uncle Ruan, I'll be taking root in our Dongqing village from now on. I'll have plenty of opportunities to come to your house for a meal. You can't fight with me for this meal today." Then, Xiao Ruofei looked at Wu Gang and said, "Mayor Wu, I've already arranged the place. Do me a favor." Wu Gang smiled and said, "Since Mr. Xia is so enthusiastic, then Lao Ruan and I will have to trouble you." Seeing that Wu Gang had agreed, Ruan Fugui didn't refuse and agreed to Xiao Ruofei's suggestion. Hence, the group of them left the house. Xiao Ruofei drove his pickup truck and led the way. Ruan Fugui sat in Wu Gang's car and followed behind. The young village accountant was still sitting in Xiao Ruofei's flying car. He had just rushed over from the beach to settle the contract. Xiao Ruofei could not leave him behind when he was treating them to a meal. The place for dinner was the West River Moon Club. Other than that, Xiao Ruofei was not familiar with any other places. Originally, Ling's restaurant would have been more suitable. However, after Ling Qingxue had forcefully stolen his first kiss, both of them had felt a little embarrassed. At this time, Xiao Ruofei could not contact Ling Qingxue. The two cars headed straight for the city one after another. When they passed by the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China, Xiao Ruofei stopped and went in with the village accountant to transfer a year's rent to the Dongqing village's account. He also gave Ruan Fugui a calming pill. Xiao Ruofei gave President Xing a call on the way and asked him to arrange a private room. When they arrived at the West River Moon Club, a beautiful female manager was already waiting at the entrance. She welcomed Xiao Ruofei and the others in very respectfully. When had Ruan Fugui ever been to such a high-end place? On the way to the private room, he was like a grandmother who had entered the Grand View Garden. Even Wu Gang rarely had the chance to enter such a high-end club like Shijiangyu. Hence, Xiao Ruofei's status in his heart had undoubtedly increased by a lot. President Xing had arranged a very luxurious private room for Xiao Ruofei and everything was ready. The dishes were served as soon as they were on the table. The dishes in the club were very exquisite. President Xing even arranged for 3 Taoyuan vegetables, which were hard to find. When they heard the VIP manager introduce Taoyuan vegetables, Wu Gang and the others were even more surprised. They repeatedly said that this meal was too grand, and they were somewhat flattered. When President Xing of the club came to propose a toast and was very polite to Xiao Ruofei, the importance of Xiao Ruofei in the hearts of Wu Gang and the others increased. Especially Wu Gang, who vaguely knew that Xiao Ruofei had an antenna in the city. He reminded himself that in the future, Xiao Ruofei would open a farm in his area, and there would be many opportunities to interact with him in the future. He must build a good relationship with Xiao Ruofei. This meal was a happy one for both the host and the guest, and the cooperation between the two sides started very happily. Xiao Ruofei personally sent Wu Gang and the others to the door and asked President Xing to arrange a room for him to rest. Jian Jia had drunk a lot in the afternoon and he could not drive at the moment. Of course, when President Xing suggested to arrange for 2 girls to relax with him, Xiao Ruofei firmly rejected it. He rested in the club room for the entire afternoon, and the smell of alcohol had completely dissipated. He then got up to say goodbye to President Xing, got his car, and went straight to Taoyuan meat stall. After lunch, he contacted Liang Qichao. He was going there to fulfill his promise to bring the white-skinned lunar patch to Liang Qichao, and he needed Liang Qichao's help with the farm construction. Before they reached the entrance of Taoyuan butcher shop, Xiao Ruofei could see the impatient Liang Qichao standing by the roadside, looking forward to it. He couldn't help but laugh. It seemed that the white-skinned lunar boundary was very attractive to Liang Qichao. Xiao Ruofei drove the car to Liang Qichao's side. Before the car even came to a complete stop, Liang Qichao opened the car door and sat in eagerly. He asked, "Are you au fait? Where's the white-skinned lunar realm?" Xiao Ruofei laughed and said, "In the car. Let's talk inside." "Good, good, good," Liang Qichao said, then stuck his head out of the car window and shouted for the security guards to open the gate. Xiao Ruofei drove directly to the 3-story office building in the Immortal Meat stall and stopped. After getting out of the car, he went to the back of the car and took out the pot of white lunar boundary that he had taken out earlier. "Brother Liang, let's talk in your office," he said to Liang Qichao. "Let's go, let's go," Liang Qichao said. He had been itching to get the white-skinned lunar plant. When they arrived at Liang Qichao's office, Xiao Ruofei placed the white-skinned lunar basin on the coffee table and said with a smile, "This is the white-skinned lunar boundary I told you about last time. Let's see if it's good enough for you." The white-skinned lunar boundary was still kept in a plastic bag by Xiao Ruofei. Liang Qichao couldn't wait to open the bag. When the white-skinned lunar boundary revealed its true appearance, Liang Qichao couldn't take his eyes off it. It was almost perfect, and its leaves were as beautiful as the misty rain. Liang Qichao was mesmerized by it. After a long while, he reluctantly looked away and said to Xiao Ruofei, "Are you au fait? This white-skinned lunar boundary is simply perfect. I won't say anything else. If you can think of your brother Liang when there's something good, I'll remember this favor. I'll take this white-skinned lunar boundary. There's no reference price for a white-skinned lunar boundary of this grade, so I'll bid 150,000. I wonder if your friend is able to accept this price?" The last time, the ice lantern dew was sold for 250,000 yuan, but that was because Lu Minghe lost his mind during the auction and became a spendthrift. In fact, it was not worth that much. Liang Qichao had offered 150,000 for the white-skinned lunar realm because he thought it was as valuable as the ice lantern he had gotten last time. Of course, the friend that Liang Qichao mentioned did not exist. It was just an excuse. "No problem, I can make the decision." Xiao Ruofei smiled. "That's great," Liang Qichao said happily, "Thank you. Are you au fait?" "I'll transfer the money to you directly," Liang Qichao said. "All right." Xiao Ruofei replied readily, "There's no rush. We can go for a walk when we have the time." "That won't do," Liang Qichao said, "Friendship is friendship, and business is business. Money and goods must be settled." "Oh right. It's still the same account from last time, right?" After getting Xiao Ruofei's confirmation, Liang Qichao immediately picked up the phone on his desk and gave instructions to the finance staff of the Immortal Meat stall. Then, he greeted Xiao Ruofei warmly. Come, have some tea. I just got my hands on some high-grade Thai guanine a few days ago." The two of them came to the coffee table and sat down. Liang Qichao skillfully picked up the tea set for Kung Fu tea and began to make tea. Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "Brother Liang, there's something I need your help with." Liang Qichao was brewing tea with his head lowered. He said without looking up, "What is it?" "As long as Big Brother can do it, I'll definitely do it for you. I've bought a piece of land in the suburbs and I'm preparing to build a farm." Xiao Ruofei said, "I heard from Qingxue that your family is in the real estate business. You're familiar with the design and construction industry, so I would like to ask you to help me with the arrangements." Upon hearing this, Liang Qichao replied without thinking, "No problem. Tomorrow, I'll arrange for the most capable manager in my dad's company to help you take a look. He was the one who helped with the planning and design of my immortal meat stall. It's not bad, right? That's great! Xiao Ruofei was overjoyed. Thank you, Brother Liang. By the way, I'll also have to trouble you with the construction work. That's even less of a problem. We have our own construction team. Liang Qichao smiled and said, after the planning is done, if you think the budget is acceptable, I'll let the construction team in at any time. All right. I'm confident in Brother Liang. Xiao Ruofei said happily, the fees and such will be based on the market price. You said it yourself. Business is business. Haha, sure. Liang Qichao said. The two of them continued to talk about the succulent plants. Liang Qichao was very interested in the high-quality seedlings of the Taoyuan meat workshop, but a young master like him naturally couldn't spend all his time on the internet, so he didn't make it in time for the release this time. He still regretted it a lot. Xiao Ruofei smiled and said that he would ask his friend to save a few pots for him next time. While they were chatting, Liang Qichao's phone rang. He picked it up and said, Hey, yes, it's me, you found one? How big is it? Oh, only 70 centimeters? Or new material? Those basically didn't have any core. Not enough, far from enough. We all want at least 1 meter of old material, you have to work hard to look for it. Please. Oh, okay. Thank you. After hanging up the phone, Liang Qichao sighed and put his phone away. Brother Liang, what's the matter? Xiao Ruofei asked. Hey! Don't even mention it, Liang Qichao shook his head and said, I've been looking for some gold Phoebe Jinan material, but this wood is so rare that it's almost extinct. It's hard to find it. Phoebe Jinan? Xiao Ruofei's interest was piqued. I've heard of it too. It's very expensive, right? He asked. Isn't that so? Even a small bracelet costs more than 100,000 yuan. The whole piece is even more priceless, Liang Qichao smiled bitterly. But this time, I only need the whole piece. You can't buy it even if you have the money. Then, Liang Qichao started to talk about the Phoebe Jinan wood with Xiao Ruofei. It turned out that the one who really needed the Phoebe Jinan material was Liang Qichao's grandfather, who was also his father's uncle. The old man was in United States Chinese. He had left China for the United States when he was very young. After decades of hard work, he had earned a huge family business and had a high status in the United States. In fact, Liang Qichao's family business was quite big now, and the initial start-up capital was provided by this old man. When people got old, they would start to think about their own funeral. The old man wanted to find a piece of Phoebe Jinan material to make his own longevity material, which was also a coffin, so that he could use it when he was old and returned to his roots. Besides, the old man had no children. Only Liang Qichao's father had a few relatives, so everyone was very concerned about this matter. The whole family started to search for the gold Phoebe wood. This was because it was very likely that this would add a lot of points to the old man's mind. The most realistic thing was that the old man might even be biased in the future distribution of the inheritance. After explaining the whole situation, Liang Qichao asked tentatively, Ruofei, does your friend who cultivates premium quality meat have any ideas? As long as the wood meets the requirements, the price is definitely not a problem. There was no correlation between the cultivation of meat and wood, so Liang Qichao was a little desperate. Brother Liang, is this urgent? Xiao Ruofei asked after some thought. Liang Qichao laughed and said, it's not urgent. After all, the old man's body is still strong. But even if it's not urgent, it's still urgent. My father is worried that his cousins will find it first. Xiao Ruofei couldn't help but smile and said, "All right, I'll ask him later and ask him to keep an eye out for you." "All right, thank you, Ruofei," Liang Qichao said courteously. He didn't have much hope. At this moment, Xiao Ruofei suddenly had an idea. "Brother Liang, the 70-centimeter tall Phoebe Jinan that you mentioned on the phone earlier, is it the wood that has been cut down, or is it a whole tree that is still alive?" Xiao Ruofei asked. Liang Qichao smiled and said, "Brother, strictly speaking, a living Jinan is just Nanma wood. The golden threads in the Jinan are the crystals formed by the core of high-quality Nanmu after natural oxidation for more than 100 years. This is what we usually call old material. We're looking for old material for the old man's longevity material, so we must have old material. Get your Avrite ovals at no/v/e/lbn.com. However, the Phoebe Jinan that my friend found really wasn't cut down. He found it by chance, so he called me to ask if I'm interested in it." Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "I didn't expect this Phoebe Jinan to be so particular about it." "Isn't that so?" Liang Qichao said, "I've been looking for wood for the old man these days. That's why I've been learning about this." Then he continued to introduce, in fact, after cutting down the Phoebe Jinan wood and leaving it on the mountain for more than 3 years, it can be formed into a very good old Phoebe Jinan material after natural weathering and drying to remove the edge material and wood properties. Unfortunately, even this kind of old material is very difficult to find because we want a whole 1 meter or more tree. 3 years of natural weathering? Xiao Ruofei's expression changed. Then, he asked calmly, "Brother Liang, the growth of the Phoebe Jinan should be very slow, right?" "That's for sure. Why else would it be so rare?" Liang Qichao said, "It will take at least 50 to 60 years for the core to start growing, and the core growth process still needs another 50 to 100 years. Only when the core reaches 95% of the entire trunk will its material be in its best state." Then, Liang Qichao smiled and said, "So, although the Orium can easily be sold for millions or tens of millions, it's impossible to make a fortune by planting it. After all the hard work, at least the great-grandchildren can enjoy the good fortune." Xiao Ruofei also laughed, but his mind began to wander. It was extremely difficult to succeed in the outside world, but with the spirit map space, it did not seem as difficult as he had imagined. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and asked, "Brother Liang, do you have any way to help me find some new material on the Phoebe Jinan? It doesn't need to be very big, it's best if it's a core that has just been cut down, I want to get one for fun." "That's not a big problem. You can buy it on the market. I've been looking for some old Phoebe Jinan materials recently, and I've made quite a few friends in this area." Liang Qichao smiled and said, "How about this? I'll get someone to handle it later, and I'll get Manager Li to bring it to you tomorrow. Isn't he going to help you decide how to plan that piece of land?" "All right. Thank you, Brother Liang." Xiao Ruofei said, "It doesn't have to be too big. The size of a palm is enough. I just bought it for fun. I'll send you the money directly when the time comes." Liang Qichao replied readily, "This small piece of new material isn't worth much. At most, it'll be 1,000 yuan. Just take it as a gift from me. I haven't even thanked you properly for helping me find such a good white-skinned lunar realm." Xiao Ruofei didn't insist because it really wasn't much money. After chatting with Liang Qichao for a while at the Immortal Meat stall, Xiao Ruofei left. He had originally wanted to look for Ling Qingxue. Since the company had already been registered, he could now sign an official agreement with Lingji F&B. However, when he thought of the sudden kiss that day, Xiao Ruofei still felt a little awkward. He thought about it and decided to forget about it. He planned to wait a few days. After returning to the holiday villa, Xiao Ruofei entered the spirit map space to take a look. The boundless space was filled with a thriving scene. The vegetables and fruits were full of vitality. The baby fish in the pond had already grown to the length of 2 fingers. The red arowana had also grown a lot. Its scales had started to show a beautiful red color. Xiao Ruofei believed that it would not be long before he would be able to harvest a red and precious red arowana. The next morning, Xiao Ruofei had just finished delivering the day's vegetables to Shi Jianyue and Ling Ji when he was welcomed by Manager Li, who was sent by Liang Qichao to help him with the farm planning. Manager Li was in his early 30s and had a thin figure. He wore a pair of glasses and looked refined. However, his skin was a little dark, perhaps because he had been working at the construction site all year round. As soon as they met, Manager Li shook Xiao Ruofei's hand enthusiastically. At the same time, he gave Xiao Ruofei the new material of Phoebe Jinan that Liang Qichao had gotten yesterday. Xiao Ruofei only wanted a small piece, but Liang Qichao's piece was not only the size of a palm, but the size of a small basin. After Xiao Ruofei expressed his gratitude, he moved the new Phoebe Jinan material into the villa. In fact, after leaving Manager Li's site, he had put the Phoebe Jinan into the spirit map space. Then, Xiao Ruofei showed Manager Li the map of the land area in the contract for a while and then brought him to the site for inspection. As they walked, Xiao Ruofei shared his thoughts with Manager Li. The flat land in front is designed for vegetable greenhouses, and a piece of land over there is reserved for cold storage in the future. Also, I'm planning to use the abandoned pond in front of us again, so we might need to clear the silt and renovate it. The mountains behind were prepared to plant fruit trees in the future, so they had to trim them together this time. Also, consider the roads in the park. Manager Li nodded as he listened, and at the same time, he quickly jotted down notes in his notebook. Xiao Ruofei thought for a while and said, "By the way, Manager Li, we need to design a unified irrigation system for the entire vegetable base. It will include greenhouses and orchards. Then, we will set the water tower on the top of the back hill. There's a river behind the mountain. We just need to use a few water pumps to transfer the water up." "All right, I'll remember this." Manager Li nodded and then asked, "Mr. Xia, do you have any other requests?" Xiao Ruofei pondered for a moment. "Also, we need to build a fence around the farm. Make it higher and have a security system. I'll give you a list of the relevant equipment later." Xiao Ruofei was an expert in security. He thought that since he was going to do it, he should take the safety measures of the farm in one step. This was because if he continued to introduce high-quality vegetables, fruits, and other rare food and plants in the future, it might attract people with ulterior motives. "All right." Manager Li replied, "Mr. Xia, if there's nothing else, I'll go back and do an overall plan and budget first. I'll show it to you later." "All right, thank you for your hard work, Manager Li," Xiao Ruofei said with a smile. After sending Manager Li off, Xiao Ruofei immediately returned to the villa. After locking the door in his bedroom, he took out the spirit painting scroll and entered the medium. Yesterday at the Immortal Meat stall, he had talked about the gold Phoebe Nanmu with Liang Qichao. However, Xiao Ruofei realized that it would be a waste if his spirit painting was just for growing vegetables and raising fish. It was time to plant some precious wood and medicinal herbs. Upgrading the Kasaya space required an immeasurable amount of money. The speed of making money now was beyond imagination to ordinary people, but Xiao Ruofei still felt that it was too slow. In order to plant precious crops, Xiao Ruofei was prepared to start with the golden Phoebe. However, before he could plant it, he still had important things to verify. He would need to use the new material of Phoebe Jinan that Liang Qichao had given him. The so-called new material was the core of the high-quality Phoebe Jinan wood that had just been cut down. It had not been naturally oxidized for a long time to form crystals, which were the gold threads and the gold silk Phoebe. The piece of material that Liang Qichao gave Xiao Ruofei was new. Xiao Ruofei picked up the piece of material and recalled the information he had found on his computer last night. Then, he took out the buck strider and 888 military dagger and made a few strokes on the wood. After that, he decisively cut it. The Phoebe Jinnan's wood was very hard. However, Xiao Ruofei's physical fitness had been greatly strengthened by absorbing the petals of the strange flower. Hence, he could still cut the wood into 3 pieces easily. The diluted petal solution from the previous seed soaking had not been poured out yet. Xiao Ruofei soaked the 3 pieces of wood in the solution. Then, he left the medium and stayed outside for an hour or 2 before going back in. The 3 pieces of wood had been soaked in the liquid for 2 or 3 days, so the remaining flower petals in the liquid should have been completely absorbed. Xiao Ruofei started to process the 3 pieces of wood. One of them was casually placed in the space. Xiao Ruofei dug a hole in the second piece of land and buried it with soil. For the third piece, Xiao Ruofei buried it in the mud at the bottom of the fish pond. Actually, Xiao Ruofei's goal was very simple. He wanted to test how long it would take for a new material to form a golden thread crystal in the space. The first piece of wood was already in a natural state of oxidation. As for the other 2 pieces, Xiao Ruofei had an idea when he saw that this piece of wood was relatively large. He wanted to try and see if he could form the ebony with gold silk, which was also known as the dark wood. Normally, wood would be buried underground or submerged in the water, and only after thousands of years would it become a high-quality ebony. Xiao Ruofei wanted to see how long it would take for ebony to form in the spirit map space and the quality of the ebony. After everything was done, Xiao Ruofei could only wait. He believed that the results would be good. The spirit map space had given him one surprise after another. This time would be no exception. For the next few days, Xiao Ruofei did not go anywhere. He stayed in the villa. Other than preparing the vegetables for the 2 families, he practiced Tai Chi, took care of the cabbage in the backyard, or looked after the succulent plants and red arowana in the interspace. In the meantime, he harvested another strange flower petal. As usual, he absorbed one of them and stored the remaining 4. He had used up a few petals during this period of time for planting, and now he had a total of 9 petals. This was Xiao Ruofei's most precious possession besides the spirit painting. He carefully placed it in a preservation box and stored it in the medium. Most of the time, Xiao Ruofei liked to move the rocking chair to the balcony and read documents. The information was about planting and cultivation, as well as some precious food, medicinal herbs, wood, and other information he had collected on the internet. He sorted out the information by category and printed them out. Xiao Ruofei had been studying and planning for the future in his free time these days. On the 3rd day, Manager Li came to Xiao Ruofei's holiday villa with the project plan and budget. The first thing Xiao Ruofei looked at was the design rendering. It had to be said that Manager Li's standard was very high. From the design drawing, the whole farm layout was neat and tidy. On the entire piece of land in front of the villa, there were 8 vegetable greenhouses that were 10 meters long and 100 meters wide. There was a large fish pond further ahead. The rows of fruit trees on the mountain behind the villa were arranged neatly. The roads, which had obviously been optimized and calculated, connected the greenhouses, fish ponds, villas, and the back mountain. Landscape trees were also designed on both sides of the roads. It could be said that this design had presented an efficient and modern farm blueprint. Xiao Ruofei then looked at the budget. He couldn't help but sweat a little. The design was good, but it was too costly. As for the vegetable greenhouse, Manager Li provided 2 plans. One was a relatively simple arched film greenhouse, which cost about 15,000 yuan. The other type was a modern multi-story greenhouse, which could be installed with internal and external shade systems, thermal insulation systems, automatic irrigation, fertilizer systems, etc. The cost per mu was as high as 100,000 yuan. In other words, if they used the second plan, one greenhouse would cost nearly 150,000 yuan, and 8 of them would cost 1.2 million yuan. This was only the cost of the greenhouse. Including the land leveling, pond clearing, mountain renovation, road laying in the park, and so on, the total budget was about 2.2 million yuan. Even if they used a relatively simple greenhouse construction plan, it would still cost 1.12 million yuan. With Xiao Ruofei's personality, he would naturally do his best. He currently had about 600,000 on hand, and the gap in funds was as high as 1.6 million. Xiao Ruofei suddenly felt a headache coming on. He thought for a long time before saying to Manager Li, "Brother Li, I'll take care of the planning and budget for now." "I'll think about it." Manager Li could see Xiao Ruofei's hesitation, but he knew that this Mr. Xiao was young Master Liang's friend, so he did not dare to show any neglect. No problem," he said. "Mr. Xiao, after you've considered it, or if you have any changes, please contact me at any time." Xiao Ruofei smiled and said, "Sure. You've worked hard, Brother Li." He politely sent Manager Li off, then walked back to the villa with the budget and plan books under his arm. They would definitely build it. This was something that was imperative. But, where did the money come from? Although he was not required to pay 2.2 million in one go, as the project progressed, the construction costs would have to be gradually settled. The construction of the farm would not take long, and his 600,000 yuan would not last long. The most important thing now was to get a sum of money. He needed at least 1 million yuan. With 1.6 million yuan in hand, he could basically last until the end of the construction. By then, with Xiao Ruofei's current earning speed, it should not be a problem for him to pay the remaining 600,000 yuan. But where was he going to get this 1 million? Xiao Ruofei furrowed his brows and thought for a long time. In the end, he decided on the jade. The last time he bought jade at the Spirit Jade House, Xiao Ruofei had come into contact with stone gambling for the first time in his life. The strong stimulation of one knife for poor, one knife for rich, one knife for linen was still fresh in his memory. Originally, Xiao Ruofei had no intention of gambling on stones. After all, no one in the world could see if there was jade hidden under the stone. If he, Xiao Ruofei, kept bidding and the price rose every time he bought something, it would attract the attention of people with ulterior motives. Then, he would be in danger of exposing the spirit map. Therefore, he would rather start from a young age and slowly manage the Paradise brand. However, he was in urgent need of more than 1 million yuan this time. Xiao Ruofei did not have any other ideas at the moment, so he could only think of a way to gamble on stones. As long as he was careful in the future and did not go or try to avoid stone gambling, it should not be too dangerous. After making up his mind, Xiao Ruofei no longer hesitated. He got up, took his bank card and all the cash, and drove straight to the antique street of the Flowers and Birds Market in Sanshan City. Xiao Ruofei walked along the bustling antique street. Soon, they arrived at the entrance of Lingyu House. Originally, Xiao Ruofei did not plan to buy raw stones from Lingyu House. After all, there were a few other shops that sold raw jadeite stones in the antique street. However, when he saw a sign that read "New Batch of Dragon's Cave High-Quality Raw Stones" hanging in the small shop of Spirit Jade House, he immediately changed his mind and decided to try his luck at Spirit Jade House. After all, the possibility of high-quality jade in the new raw stones was higher than the raw stones that had been selected by countless customers. Xiao Ruofei muttered to himself and walked into Lingyu House. "Hello, Mr. Xiao. Are you here to buy jade again?" A surprised voice was heard. Xiao Ruofei took a closer look and realized that it was the waitress who had served him before. He smiled and nodded at her. Is Boss Chen here? Xiao Ruofei asked. It's here. Please have a cup of tea here and wait a moment, I'll go in and call the boss. The waiter said enthusiastically. All right, thank you for your trouble. Xiao Ruofei said with a smile. After sitting in the reception area for a while, Xiao Ruofei saw Boss Chen, who was wearing a dark blue tang suit, walk out with a big smile on his face. Boss Chen seemed to have a special preference for tang suits. Brother Xiao. Boss Chen extended his hand to Xiao Ruofei enthusiastically. Xiao Ruofei shook his hand and said, Boss Chen, sorry to disturb you again. Where? I can't even thank you enough for taking care of my business, Brother Xia. Boss Chen said heartily, how is it? Are you here to buy jade again? Xiao Ruofei smiled and nodded, I just happened to be doing something nearby, so I came to buy some jade. This time, it's still about 300,000 yuan. It'll be fine as long as the quality is similar to the last time. No problem. I just went to Myanmar a few days ago and bought a batch of jade. The quality is quite good. Boss Chen said, I'll get someone to prepare it immediately. Thank you for your trouble. Xiao Ruofei said, by the way, Boss Chen, I just saw a sign at the door. Did your shop just bring in a new raw stone? Yeah. Boss Chen laughed. The main purpose of this trip to Myanmar was to bring in raw stones and buy some jade. The quality of this batch of raw stones was not bad. They were from Dragon's Cave. Why? Brother Xia, are you interested in joining us for some fun? I know nothing about stone gambling. Xiao Ruofei replied noncommittally. What does it matter? Boss Chen said with a smile, no matter how knowledgeable a person is, he can't compete with heaven, defying luck. Brother Xia, your luck last time was really amazing. Then, let's get 2 pieces for fun. Xiao Ruofei said, pretending to be moved. Of course. One look and I know that Brother Xia is a man of great destiny. Who knows, we might be able to get a huge increase in the price. Boss Chen said. All right then. Anyway, you guys still need some time to prepare the jade, so you're free anyway. Xiao Ruofei said, then go and choose 2 pieces to play with. I hope Boss Chen has good words for me. Ha ha ha. I wish Brother Xia a swift victory. Boss Chen laughed heartily and said, let's go together. Boss Chen personally brought Xiao Ruofei to the shop next door. It was noon, so there were not many people in the store. There were only 2 or 3 people picking raw stones. They all greeted Boss Chen when they saw him, and Boss Chen responded with a smile. Then, he turned to Xiao Ruofei and said, Brother Xia, all the new raw stones are here. There's a price on each of them. You can choose whatever you want. If you choose it, I'll give you a 10% discount. Ha ha ha. There was even a discount. Then I won't be polite. Pick a few more pieces later, Xiao Ruofei said with a smile. Then, he began to choose the raw stones. Boss Chen knew that customers usually did not want to be disturbed when they were choosing raw stones, so he did not go over, but walked to the side and sat down. The store was filled with rows of shelves, on which raw stones of different sizes were arranged. A price tag was placed next to each raw stone, and the price was marked according to the performance of the raw stone. It ranged from a few thousand to a few million. Xiao Ruofei walked through the shelves, seemingly choosing randomly. He looked at the raw stones very quickly, and after a rough glance, he moved on to the next raw stone. At first, the few customers were secretly paying attention to Xiao Ruofei. After all, he was personally accompanied by Boss Chen. However, when they saw Xiao Ruofei's stance, they couldn't help but laugh in their hearts. So he was a rookie. He should be the kind of person who was stupid but had a lot of money. Otherwise, why would Old Chen personally accompany him here? This was because people who played stone gambling all year round would be very careful when choosing raw stones, especially when they encountered raw stones with good appearance. They would carefully observe every detail and look at it over and over again. If the window was open, they would have used a strong flashlight to get closer and take a closer look. People like Xiao Ruofei, who only knew how to do things on a cursory basis, were clearly amateurs. However, these people, including Boss Chen, did not notice that Xiao Ruofei seemed to touch every raw stone casually when he passed by. Of course, with Xiao Ruofei's skills that he had trained in the special forces and the layers of shelves, it was easy for people not to notice the abnormality. Xiao Ruofei had even clearly observed the positions of the few cameras in the store. Along the way, Xiao Ruofei had checked more than half of the raw gemstones. Every time there was jade in the raw stone, the spirit map scroll hidden in his pocket would react. Based on the vibration of the painting, Xiao Ruofei could roughly determine the value of the raw stone. So far, Xiao Ruofei had not made any surprising discoveries. In fact, most of the raw stones couldn't make the spirit map scroll react at all, which meant that these raw stones were just stones without any jade. No wonder so many people went bankrupt from stone gambling. Xiao Ruofei mumbled in his heart that the most expensive one among the raw stones in Xuanji that had no chance of producing jade was priced at more than 1,000,000 yuan. There were only about 10 raw gemstones that could make the spirit map scroll shake, but Xiao Ruofei did not want any of them. Some of the paintings did not have much of a reaction, and the jade in the raw stones was not worth much money. Of course, this was relative to Xiao Ruofei's needs. If it was an ordinary customer who was lucky enough to pick these raw stones, they could still make a small profit. Only a raw stone could cause a spirit painting to have a strong reaction. Xiao Ruofei estimated that the value of the jade inside was at least 2 million. Unfortunately, the price of this huge raw stone had also reached 2.2 million. In other words, even if Xiao Ruofei had the money to buy it, he would only make a small profit. This was not the result Xiao Ruofei wanted. Xiao Ruofei sighed and looked at the shelf on the other side. He could only hope that he could find the raw stones he wanted there. He strode to the other side of the shelf. Just as he passed by a pile of raw stones scattered in the corner of the shop, the spirit painting scroll in his arm suddenly vibrated. Xiao Ruofei was stunned. He had not touched any of the raw gemstones, but the spirit painting scroll was vibrating on its own. What was going on? There had never been a situation where the origin stone spirit map had trembled on its own before he had even touched it. He quickly observed his surroundings and found that no one was paying attention to him. Then, he turned his gaze to the most suspicious pile of unremarkable raw gemstones. Well, truckers, that's all for this part. See you all in the next video.